Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the official podcast of the epicreview.com. That's thepicreview.com, where we always smell what The Rock is cooking. As always, we're coming to you straight from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina. I'm Brad Bell, and joining me today, as always, is
Jerry Reed, also known as Barbecue 17.
Also, just to let you know, you can email any questions or comments you have about the podcast or any of the work we do at the Epic Review in general to thepicreview@gmail.com. And once again, we are very proud to have Collector's World in Gastonia, North Carolina, sponsoring yet another edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the place where Jerry and I go for all of our comic book needs and a lot of our collecting needs.
I was just there Saturday.
Jerry picked up quite a few books, one of which we're going to get into here shortly.
Pretty heavily.
Just to let you know what's coming up on the show, we're going to start with what we've been checking out this week. Then we'll get into what we deem to be the epic news items of the week. And then we'll get into our featured review of the week, which is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's latest film, Snitch. So let's go ahead and get started. Jerry, what have you been checking out this week and in hand have had me check out?
Okay. Well, what I have had Brad check out this week, and I think anybody who reads the site or knows me or listens to the podcast knows that I'm a huge Masters of the Universe fan. It is one of my favorite, fictional universes, one of my favorite toy lines of all time. I've had subscriptions to Mattel's Masters of the Universe Classics line since 2011, but I've bought the figure since 2009.
And that's through MattyCollector.com.
Through MattyCollector.com. This summer, DC Comics released a 6-issue miniseries. They started this summer, but it just finished. I think it just finished this month. I just picked it up. It is a 6-issue series that's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. This is DC's attempt to bring He-Man and the Masters of the Universe back to fans. They've done 6 issues. They also have done 2 one-shots, the Birth of Skeletor one-shot, and the Origins of He-Man one-shot, which I didn't have Brad read. But I think
maybe I should have.
Yeah, maybe you should have. But I'm kind of just going with the 6-issue series here, because Masters is one of those properties that has had, obviously a lot of popularity. I really think it has the most ardent, rabid fans of any property whatsoever.
That's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement,
bold.
But if you look at Masters of the Universe fan sites, if you look at the art they create, the conventions they do, for being a property that's always just, other than in the early 80s or the early mid 80s when it came out, Masters has kind of always been one of those properties that's just sort of been off to the side. It hasn't had its big revivals like G.I. Joe or Transformers.
In big part because there hasn't been that big Masters of the Universe movie yet to kind of reintroduce it to a new generation of fans.
When the Dolph Lundgren movie came out, in 87, Masters of the Universe was really starting to be on the decline. And that movie unfortunately hit at the tail end of the property as things were kind of winding down for what you might call the first generation.
We were more into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles age by the time the Masters movie really hit.
That's what was getting ready to happen. It was getting ready to hit. It was just about there.
So it's kind of like when the third Ninja Turtles movie hit, when everything that kids cared about at the time was Power Rangers, Power Rangers, Power Rangers.
Yeah. Well, Masters of the Universe has had a long history with comics. The original toys came with, you might call them illustrated storybooks, but after a while they became mini comics, and fans still love those. Had some great writers on them, and artist Bruce Timm from Batman Animated Series fame, he was involved with those. So they've always had a lot of people involved with them, have been really popular. DC Comics published a few Masters of the Universe comics in the 80s. They did a 3 issue series, which I'm holding one up for Brad to see. Obviously, everybody listening to the podcast.
He has it framed, which he proudly displays it in his living room.
We do. My wife was open to that. It's the DC 3-issue series, mini series from the early 80s, and we do have them in nice comic frames. Hanging in a row on our wall in the living room. Looks awesome out there.
One quick thing I wanted to say about Masters is Masters of the Universe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, it was started as a toy line, and then the TV show spun out of that. It wasn't a TV show first, or obviously it wasn't a movie first.
Yeah. It was started as a toy line. I mean, in 82 was when they first came out, but when this was in the conception stage was the early 80s. I mean, Kenner had a massive hit with Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars was popular. It was, taking over the boys' aisle. Hasbro was working to get G.I. Joe out there to, in that 3 3/4 scale that most of us know, Real American Hero. Mattel wanted their piece of the boys' action figure, pie that was out there. They wanted to make some money. So Masters of the Universe was conceived, and it was sold with mini comics that came with the figures. DC did a comic series. The Filmation TV series hit, which essentially it was originally designed to be a commercial for the toys, but it was a great cartoon. People still very much love it. It's a little campy. It's a little silly at times, but I think for a lot of Masters fans, that is their primary canon.
And Jerry owns every season of that in the collector's edition box set, right?
I am missing a couple seasons. They get really expensive, but I'm trying to get all of them. So
the figures started coming out in 1982. Mm-hmm. What was the gap between that and the TV show? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think the Filmation series started in 1984.
Okay, so it was a good kind of test to see, wow, kids are buying these toys. We can sell more of them if we put out this Saturday morning cartoon show.
Sure, I mean, I think that's really when Masters went crazy, was when they had the Filmation TV series,
and that was
tied into it.
That was the blueprint for a lot of stuff in the 80s. Wasn't Ninja Turtles, were the toys released first?
The toys were released first,
okay.
Yeah. And the comic was first, but then the toys, and it was 1983. I am wrong. Ran from 83 to 85, 2 seasons of 65 episodes each, and then that actually transitioned to what was called She-Ra, Princess of Power, which was He-Man's sister. She's on a different world. He-Man was on Eternia. She was on a realm in a planet called Etheria in another realm, and it really spun off. I mean, the toys were clearly intended to get girls into Masters of the Universe, but the TV series obviously resonated with a lot of male fans. It's actually better written than the Masters of the Universe cartoon a lot of the time. Has a lot of the Masters of the Universe characters from He-Man crossover into She-Ra.
Is He-Man in the She-Ra television show?
He makes a lot of guest appearances. He's on the first couple episodes, which was released in theaters as a movie called Secret of the Sword.
Wow.
And he makes appearances from time to time.
Okay, so you're a big fan of She-Ra, too.
I am a big fan of She-Ra. There's a She-Ra poster on the wall up there.
Yes,
what a silly question,
beautiful.
Brad Bell. So...
All right, Jerry, let's go ahead and get into it. This brand new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe comic line DC did. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and give you my thoughts. Jerry asked me to read these.
Sure.
Wanting to get an opinion of a person who really doesn't know much about He-Man or Masters of the Universe. I've seen the Dolph Lundgren movie. When I was young, I did have a He-Man sword. But Masters of the Universe was a little before my time. I was more in the TMNT and Power Rangers
And when
generation.
they relaunched it in 2000, you probably...
I wasn't really into it. I probably wasn't into stuff like this, kind of geeky stuff, back then as much as I am now.
You're trying to be cool
So. Yeah. So okay. I never checked out the 2000 series either.
Yeah, so Brad... I'm coming at this from the hardcore. I mean, you can look around the room that we're podcasting in if you could see, and I mean, there's a ton of Masters of the Universe posters and comics and artwork and pictures and figures in here. I mean, it's like Masters of the Universe Central, whereas Brad is somebody who's into the general geek culture, but
read comic books, see all these movies, watch all kinds of cartoon and various other types of shows, but I haven't had much exposure to Masters.
And, you know, as a hardcore Masters fan on great sites like He-Man.org and, you know, stuff, we're always talking about what is general nerddom? What are the general fanboys who will watch every Marvel movie, who, you know, like Star Wars and all this stuff? What would they think of a Masters movie? What would they think if this property got relaunched in a big way? Because Mattel's been really conservative with it. All the action figures have been released through their website, predominantly a subscription model, so you know the people buying them are hardcore fans. They've done a couple little experimentations by releasing a figure or two at Toys R Us, and, you know, those kind of went over, but they were mostly repaints. So, Brad, I want to hear your thoughts on them, but I actually went on He-Man.org and posted a question for some folks to ask you questions. This was their chance to find a real-life person who was willing to sit down to read the 6-issue comic and to ask you some questions about your first introduction into the world of Eternia.
I'll be very glad to answer the good folks at He-Man.org's questions. Hopefully I can do them justice.
Okay. So first of all, if I can just get the first question I have, this is from Vaults of Grayskull. And Vaults of Grayskull asks, well, the obvious question is, where have you been all these years?
Well, just like I said, Masters was a little before my time. I was more in the kind of Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers generation. Jerry's a little bit older than I am, so it's just it was a limited exposure for me, mainly just the Dolph Lundgren film. I've never seen an episode of She-Ra or the Masters TV show.
Oh, I was born in 83, but I think a lot of my Master stuff, actually, I remember getting some as a kid, you know, getting some toys at Christmas, but I mainly remember finding a lot of them at garage sales. I mean, I'm pretty confident that my original Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain playsets came from garage sales that my parents found. I do distinctively remember getting the Fright Zone playset on a Christmas morning. So, but once again, I grew up with it. You did not. So where have you been all these years? Well, we don't know. Hanging out with the Power Rangers apparently, but you're here now. So
that's right. I've been in the morphin grid.
Okay. Here's the more sensible question, as Vaults of Grayskull's words. What do you like and dislike about this property? Just your general thoughts, not on the storyline necessarily, just on the property in general. What do you like and dislike about it?
A lot of stuff I liked about it, and not to talk too much about the comic book, because this question's about the property in general, is it seems that He-Man has a pretty decent rogue gallery of villains, which is something that I quickly discovered reading the comic. And, you know, mainly I was only familiar with Skeletor. And I think that with so many good villains, Skeletor, Trapjaw, Merman, Beastman, Evelyn, people like that, it really made me think that, you know, wow, this could be a major property. So I see the potential of it. I don't know. I guess it kind of plays. He-Man's kind of a weird genre for me, because even though it's kind of a blend of science fiction and fantasy. And I'm a big science fiction type fan. Your Star Wars. I like Star Trek. Don't love it. But as far as fantasy, not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So.
And it's more that barbarian fantasy. It's more fantasy along the lines of something like
Conan.
Conan the Barbarian, or something like that, like Dungeons and Dragons, more so than something like Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time or Game of Thrones,
and,
I think.
Actually, it may be, Jerry hasn't watched Game of Thrones, it actually may be a little closer to Game of Thrones, because that's more of your kind of brute fantasy. It's not as intricate with the magic and the stuff like that as you may think. But what I like about the kind of fantasy that He-Man is I think it will play well, and with me did play decent with a wider audience, because it's not just a strict type of fantasy. It's it's more barbaric, more action oriented.
Yeah,
so
very
I like
much
that
so.
about the property.
And you mentioned the sci-fi elements, and that's kind of one of the really intriguing elements of the property. I think in the earliest Masters stuff, the idea is that all of this technology and stuff that exists, it was left from a long time ago. It was created by, ancient Eternians or some ancient people, and technology's left over, and maybe in a way even akin to magic in a sense, and people have kind of integrated it. So it's just a really interesting world. Okay, what did you dislike about the property? You said you liked the Rogues Gallery, you liked that He-Man had a lot of different villains, you liked the blend of fantasy and sci-fi, and the action, the action of the property. What didn't you like about it?
It seems like that He-Man kind of has a lot of stuff in the backstory that sits up the main story. Like, what is Castle Grayskull? Why is it so special? Why is He-Man's sword so special? Stuff that I was expecting to read in an origin story, which, this is just about the property in general, so I'm not saying there's not great depictions of that origin out there. But it doesn't seem as maybe user-friendly, just the way it's set up. Like, how am I, like somebody who's not a Masters fan, right now, how am I supposed to get into the property? This comic just came out.
Okay.
But, I mean, there's no TV show currently on.
That's true.
There's a great action figure line. They're beautiful, but I'm not going to go buy those figures if I have no love for the characters or property. So it's just, I need to be introduced to this world in an interesting way, and I kind of have with the comic, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Well, I think
later.
You bring up one of the interesting things, because Masters of the Universe has so many divergent canons. I think if you asked a group, asked a number of different fans and said, give me a hard answer, what is Castle Grayskull? What is the significance of He-Man's sword? What is the power of Grayskull? You get a bunch of different answers, because some people are going to base it off the Filmation cartoon. Some people are going to base it off, the original mini comics had different answers at different times. Some people are going to go with the new canon, which is in the on the back of the figures, the Masters of the Universe Classics figures. There's actually a story that's being written in the bios of the characters. Some people like it, some people don't, but it's actually an attempt to blend together 30 some years of Masters of the Universe history. So you're right, though, there's not a great place for somebody just to jump on. I can't give you a Batman Year One, of Masters of the Universe. I can't give you a He-Man Issue 1 that, He-Man Origins that tells you everything. So you're right, there's not a great place to jump on if you're not a fan.
And every franchise that wants to expand and live on throughout the generations, I think they need something like that.
I do kind of agree. I mean, I think that's what takes help someone not to feel overwhelmed by a property initially. Somebody can say, okay, here's this trade paperback, it's the greatest Masters of the Universe story ever told, or, here's this trade paperback, it is the detailed origins of everything that's going on. So,
whereas with, like, say, Spider-Man, for example, we've had 2 Spider-Man origin movies in the past 10 years.
Sure, you could watch that movie and get a pretty good idea of what's happening.
Exactly. So.
Okay. The last question I have, and this is from Yuka. He's a Masters Universe fan from Finland who actually is one of the hosts of Masters Comic Cast. And they are specifically talking about these new comics that are coming out. DC's not just doing these 6 comics. They're going to continue the series now as well. They've also been releasing some mini comics online. I've been getting them through Comixology, which are sort of like introduction stories to characters, but they're very different. I don't know that they're necessarily in the same canon or universe as these 6 issues. But they've been talking about him. But Yuka asks, and he says, I don't know how fans overall have reacted outside of hardcore ones, so I'm always intrigued to hear their opinions. For instance, on YouTube, there are people who reviewed the Origin of Skeletor comic, because it relies heavily on readers knowing history. Basically, what are your thoughts? As a new reader to this comic, with no background knowledge, how did you feel you were able just to jump in and start enjoying the story?
I do feel that I was able, especially in the earlier issues, especially the first issue, I felt like I was able to jump in, and I was interested and a little captivated to find out where this was going to go. But I don't know, as the story went on, I didn't find it as accessible. As we started to learn more things about He-Man and, Skeletor's quest for the power of Grayskull and things of that nature, I was like, in order for me to care anymore, I need to know a little more about these things.
Okay.
And to me, that's not a big of a problem since this is becoming an ongoing series, but it was originally planned as a 6-issue thing, right?
Originally it seemed like it was strictly 6 issues, that's it.
And this is kind of an introduction to Masters, almost origin, a type of origin story, if you will.
It's an origin story without doing an origin. I mean, just jumping in, and I don't think this is a spoiler at all, because it's the premise of the series, the way it was marketed, is that He-Man and all of the heroic warriors, all of the good guys, have forgotten who they are. Skeletor has somehow put a curse on them, and they no longer know who they are. Instead of being Prince Adam, instead of being He-Man, Prince Adam is living in a cabin in the woods as a woodsman, and having these dreams or these visions of his alter ego He-Man, but he doesn't realize he has any connection to this. So the characters are not realizing, who they are. And so if you're a new reader, I guess the thought is you're being reintroduced to them, through this, by them discovering who they are.
Or you're being introduced to them.
You're being introduced to them. If you're a fan, you're jumping right in and saying, okay, this is the latest plot from Skeletor, what's happening?
And that may be that's one of the problems I had with the book. Are we ready to get into the book yet?
Let's get into the book now.
Okay. I'll just give you a few things that I liked and didn't like, and as a diehard Masters fan, you chime in.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I think Jerry and I will both agree one of the things that bothered us, just as comic book fans in general, was the changing of the art. Mm-hmm. I realize with release schedules and everything like that, sometimes you have to have different artists come in. But we're talking about different artists on different pages of the book.
Yeah.
To me, that's just, I don't know. I really don't enjoy that. If you're going to rotate artists per issue, that's fine, but don't change it up on me every page.
I know every now and then something happens where an artist gets behind and they have to call somebody into the book, but this became a pretty recurring issue. And it's not that there was any, really bad art or, anything like that, but it definitely made the book feel uneven.
A book like this, especially a type of origin story that's meant to introduce people to a character, needs consistency, and not only as story but as art. Think of Batman Year One. The art is that Dave Michael. I'm butchering his name. It's Dave Zuni. Mazzucchelli. But that art fits that book well and captures the kind of story they were going for with Year One. I apologize if we butchered that name.
I think it is Mazzucchelli.
Mazzucchelli. We
don't take a lot of notes before podcasting. Brad takes more than I do. So
yeah, I actually prepared. Jerry, on the other hand, just winged.
I'm just winging it here.
But yeah, I think this book would have benefited from a consistency in art, but that's not a problem with He-Man or the Master's story. Yeah. That's a comic book issue I had.
And here's my thing. I mean, I love art. I love looking at it. I love comics. I am not a super well-trained artist. I can't draw very well. Brad was looking at some of my terrible doodles from a bulletin that I had, just was kind of sketching on. But when I can tell, okay, there's a very noticeable change in art in the same book, and it doesn't tie into the story or in some way, that always is kind of a sign to me that, okay, somebody got rushed or somebody wasn't able to keep up. And, if it happens for one issue, okay, makes sense. But when it seems to be consistently through a 6-issue series. And I will say that there was a lot of changing around. I know the editor changed pretty early on. The writer changed. James Robinson was only on the first 2 books. Halfway between, sometime during the second book, Keith Giffen took over, because the original artist was Philip Tan, and then...
I enjoyed Tan's work.
Yeah, well, Pop Mon jumps on, and I think it's Pop Mon or Pop Man. I liked his art as well.
Was that the last issue?
He was fully on the last issue. I don't think that Philip Tan did anything in the last issue that I'm aware of.
Tan and Pop's art were the best, and the last battle between He-Man and Skeletor, everything, that really benefited from having Pop's art all the way through.
The wraparound cover, the Dave Wilkins cover in the last issue, I'm looking at the one with, He-Man jumping at Skeletor and it goes all the way around, was just a beautiful cover. I mean, I really liked it. So. And
I can, even if I don't like a franchise or character, I can appreciate great art, but I can also ridicule inconsistency and bad art. None of it was bad.
And you will do that, sir. You will do that.
I just want consistency. But let's move on from my rant on the art.
Okay.
What I really enjoyed, and I touched on this earlier, but He-Man does have a very good rogues gallery, and this was my introduction to them. Like I said, I just knew Skeletor, but it was really eye-opening to me to see Beastman, Trapjaw, Merman, Evil Lyn, all those. I really did enjoy that. I feel this book, the approach they took with it was very solid. It set up initially He-Man as Adam as a relatable guy. He's a woodsman. I could piece 2 and 2 together. I knew this was going to eventually become He-Man, but it was cool to see him be relatable, and I think you need relatable characters, and it's like, how do you make someone who's a master of the universe or as powerful as He-Man relatable? You put him on Earth and make him,
On Earth? He's not on Earth, though.
Oh, he's not on Earth?
They're in Eternia. Okay. This all takes place in Eternia.
Okay, I thought the beginning was on Earth. Nope. So that shows you how much I apologize to the Masters fans.
In some canons, Earth does exist in Masters of the Universe. In some of the canons, He-Man's mother is from Earth, that she was an astronaut who crash-landed on Eternia. And, married.
That's interesting.
Yeah, married Randor.
But from the woodworking with He-Man there, and is he with his uncle or
his
father?
It's his dad.
His dad. Okay.
King Randor. Although in the first issue they call him Fedor, Fedor, which is really weird because there's never been. I don't know if that's supposed to be something in Skeletor's spell that makes He-Man even forget his father's name and he thinks it's Fedor, or what's happening.
But, yeah, I mean, even if it was, is it inertia?
Eternia.
Excuse me. Eternia. I'm going to get butchered on the Masters cast. Eternia. Even if it was on Eternia, it was, I didn't see a lot of...
Roast Google Dinner gets a hold of it. So.
I didn't see any aliens or anything. It was human beings. At least
they're Eternians.
But it was Eternians from those first couple pages.
Sure, okay.
But I probably just upset Jerry. He's swearing in the background.
No,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I don't know. I want to see with this story better character development. I want to, he erases He-Man's memory, and we find out that, at least I find out, is this commonplace that Skeletor is He-Man's uncle?
At this point, yeah, it's pretty commonplace, pretty common knowledge.
Okay, I want to know, I would like to see a little bit more about that dynamic of why does he hate him so much?
Yeah.
Maybe
I should have had you read the Birth of Skeletor comic, but it's not marketed as part of this 6-issue series.
Exactly, It's supposed to be a 6-issue limited series to introduce new fans and kind of, give something to previous fans. So I think it's fair to judge it off of these 6 books. But I will read that Skeletor comic. But I don't know. I don't know. I want to know more, which maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I come out of this wanting to know more.
Well, it's not bad if you're saying, hey, I want to go read more Masters comics or, watch the cartoon or something. I mean, that's a good thing.
I just want to know more about stuff like I said earlier, like Castle Grayskull. They talk at nauseum about Castle Grayskull in this, and I know it's very important. All I knew about it coming in was it's the giant playset that's coming out later this year that everybody in the toy collecting world is pumped for, but do they really say in these first 6 issues why it's so important?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have the knowledge I had, I would really be wondering what's going on. But I gotta say, a lot of my knowledge is pieced together from multiple sources and discussions as well. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would like to. I mean, Castle Grayskull is, it's of utmost importance, and would like to know more about that. And you may say, like, we said it may be covered in future books, but hey, it's important here. It's this isn't something we need in the first 6 issues of a series or a limited series. I think you need to sit this stuff up a little bit better. Not that it was done horrible. I enjoy reading the 6 issues.
Well, something directly that felt like what you would see at the beginning of an origin film. I mean, when if ideally I was introducing somebody to Masters of the Universe, if they were to say, hey, we're gonna make the movie, and you create the intro or the origin. I mean, I would want something similar to Lord of the Rings. I mean, remember in Fellowship of the Ring does that origin, that introduction, this prologue that really says, okay, this is the universe you're in. This is what's happened, this is what's at stake, this is who the players are, and now we take you into this smaller story that's happening in this wider universe. And I think something like that would have benefited this book, because I can understand somebody being, a little bit lost going into it.
I think one of the things that hurts the book is it doesn't commit itself either way.
Yeah.
It doesn't commit itself to being a true origin story, but at the same time, it doesn't commit itself to being something that just to appeal to diehard Masters fans.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a little bit of both. And I don't know. I think if you had to go in one end or go one way or the other, is this a straight up origin story, or is this something that all Masters fans are going to pick up and love? And I can see why a diehard Masters fan would kind of get irritated with this a little bit.
Well, I mean, and there were other things too that were, different from established continuities or things that didn't make sense. I mean, one of the things to me, and this is so probably nitpicky as a fanboy, Castle Grayskull looked really weird in this book. It did not look like Castle Grayskull that I was always familiar with, and I think Castle Grayskull is one of the most iconic images from Masters of the Universe.
It's like the Death Star.
Yeah, I mean, you could do different styles, or, if you have a couple different turrets here and there or something, but it really looked different for me.
Jerry, real quick, tell me and the audience, besides the people on He-Man.org and Masterscast, what is Castle Grayskull?
Okay. Castle Grayskull is this ancient fortress. It's an ancient castle that's on Eternia. Most of the time it's depicted as being basically abandoned. The only person living there is the sorceress. That the sorceress lives there. She's the sorceress of Castle Grayskull, and within the castle is what is called the power of Grayskull, or basically the power of Eternia. And different canons have said it's different things. It's actually sometimes depicted as being power from King Grayskull himself, which is a distant ancestor of He-Man's. Sometimes it's the power of a group of elders of Grayskull. I think the 1987 movie seems to imply that Eternia is at the center of some kind of nexus of power in the universe, and all of that comes to a point at Castle Grayskull. So it is very mysterious.
So in the comic, it's revealed that He-Man, not He-Man's sword, but He-Man himself is kind of the the source of the carrier of the power of Grayskull. So.
Usually the idea is that he uses the power sword to tap into the power of Grayskull. That it's a conduit that allows him to become He-Man, to take on this power. But in this comic, it seems to reveal that He-Man has the power within him, and which, definitely sounds like the nice message of like a 80s movie or something. You have the power within you, He-Man. But it is kind of one of those things that somehow the power is in him, that Skeletor has gone to Grayskull and found the power isn't there. There's nothing he can, nothing he can tap at Grayskull.
There's nothing that the bones of Skeletor can tap.
Tap at Grayskull. Oh, gosh.
Who usually resides at Castle Grayskull?
The Sorceress of Grayskull.
That's it. Okay, so the Masters of the Universe is not usually...
No, they don't... Nobody, chills out at nobody chills out at Grayskull. It's usually abandoned, and...
That's a common misconception among non-Masters fans. I was talking to Andrew Stokes, who writes a lot of video game stuff for us on the website, and we both kind of thought that Castle Grayskull was where Skeletor lived.
Well, it is kind of interesting because it has a giant green skull in the front of it, and here's Skeletor. But no, he's just trying to break into it,
and in the book,
to get the power.
In the book, it starts out Skeletor's at Grayskull, so...
Well, he's conquered it at this point, which in the 1987 movie, it starts out, too, that he's conquered Castle Grayskull, but most of the time, only the Sorceress lives in Castle Grayskull and, watches over it as a protector.
The one thing I want to say, to sum it up, my feelings on this book and the Masters property is, this is just from an outsider looking into the Masters universe, the Master of the Universe.
Yeah.
Is if you're going to do an origin story, do an origin story. Whether that's going to be a comic or a movie, make it very user-friendly while at the same time paying homage to everything that hardcore Masters fans. And it can be done. Good writers do it all the time. Look at what Joss Whedon did in Avengers. That was me knowing a ton of stuff about those characters. I could see the little moments,
Yeah.
Like the interaction between Cap and Iron Man and how that's going to play out down the road as they're, the Boy Scout and kind of the narcissistic jerk.
Millionaire playboy.
Playboy.
Philanthropist.
Exactly. I can see, they lay the framework for that, and you can tell it's going to pay off. But at the same time, even if you knew nothing about those characters, they're set up and introduced very well. And, of course, I'm using the best example possible of that. The Avengers movie was crazy epic. But, hopefully Masters will find somebody. Hopefully they will do a movie.
John Chu is sort of the one that keeps popping up in conversation, that who is doing JoJo Retaliation.
Okay, so he's John Chu obviously has a love for these characters in this property, or
you know what? I don't really recall what he has said. I mean, I think he's definitely familiar with it. He seems like somebody who seems to have a love for a lot of those kind of 80s fanboy, toy-based properties. So we'll just have to see as more interviews with him come out.
So He-Man fans, find your Joss Whedon, find the guy that cares about that property and can make the movie. And I think that's what all hardcore fans of shows like that want. So,
yeah.
Is there anything else about this you want to say,
I just want to
Jerry?
throw out a couple.
All right.
Overall, I like the series, but I think I'm, sort of in agreement with you, Brad, even coming at it as a hardcore fan, that this was an interesting story, but it had a lot of differences. It had a lot of differences from what I was familiar with, which that's okay. I don't mind differences. But if it had come as more of an origin story and explained things a bit more of where this universe was coming from, I think I would have liked it more. There were some really cool introductions to characters. I mean, the first time that Beastman shows up as Adam is trying to leave the woods was just a really cool scene. It was a neat way. It never felt like character overload.
No.
I mean, characters were introduced in logical ways. Here's Merman. Trapjaw is kind of this leader of like this group of, desert nomads. Evil Lynn has a palace that's all under her own control. So they really did a nice way of introducing each of these villains one by one. I think for me, the strength of the whole book, the number one reason to read this book was the way it depicted the relationship between Adam and Tila.
I thought you were going to say the art.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Adam and Tila have never had a romantic relationship.
See, when I started reading this, I thought Tila was She-Ra.
Okay.
She was going to be She-Ra, and I had no idea. Obviously, I was way off base.
Okay. Well, here's the interesting thing. I mean, Tila has always been depicted as a redhead, except in the earliest DC comics, she's blonde. She has long blonde hair. Usually she has red hair that's kind of up in a bun, I guess you would call it. She has long blonde hair in the original DC comics. So I kind of think it was a throwback to that. But the relationship between Adam and Tila was awesome. I mean, it really showed them, kind of having that almost sibling rivalry type of thing, without knowing each other. They still had this closeness that built up, and yeah, they picked at each other a lot, but it was really cool. I really liked that.
Which made sense since she was a blonde in the original DC comic.
Yeah, they did something kind of neat with it.
DC would make her blonde.
A couple things that were really interesting was when you get to the end of the book and people start showing up, like Battle Cat shows up. You have that scene where after Adam's become He-Man, he's in that room making battle plans, and you can see Ram Man and Moss Man and Stratos. And the thing I thought was weird, though, usually in comics, and I mean, I know it's sort of a, maybe might take somebody out of story a little bit, but usually in a comic, if I'm introducing a new character, like if nobody knew who you were, Brad, I might say something like, "We're getting ready to talk about Masters now, Brad." And that way everybody that's listening goes, "Oh, he's talking to Brad." He-Man's talking to characters that have never been introduced in the book. I know one time he's talking to Stratos about something, and I kind of would have expected him to say something like, "Okay, well, here's the deal, Stratos," just so somebody like you would know, okay, this is Stratos. Here's another character. This is not just some, random nameless dude who looks like a bird who's chilling out here. I kind of wished for that. I kind of thought, well, that might have helped newcomers to get what was going on. But overall, I liked it. I'm really excited to see where it goes. It laid some great seeds that made me wonder what's coming up next. I know that the series is planned to move forward. They've talked a little bit about it, that they're going to introduce Hordak, who's kind of the big baddie in the She-Ra Princess Power series. She-Ra's going to be introduced in the comic. One of the most interesting comments, it's a one-off comment. They're talking about being betrayed. He-Man's talking about being betrayed, and I'm going to pull it up real quick. It's in issue 6, and I'm grabbing my comic right here.
And, the final issue, which Jerry is looking through for this comment, the art was... I've complained a lot about the art, but it was very well. Pop's art was good. There was one splash page in particular, I think, at the beginning of the story that was just beautiful. Yeah, where, it's the power. And I love when, stories open up with the kind of big Jack Kirby splash page. But, Jerry, you got that.
He-Man's talking to Tila. He's talking to everybody and about, thinking maybe he should show up by himself. Not a whole army against Skeletor, just He-Man. And He-Man says, "Orko's not here to betray us this time." That's freaking huge. Do you know who Orko is?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Orko was like the lovable, childlike character in the original Filmation cartoon who was like the lovable comic relief character. He was loyal. Think of somebody like Snarf from Thundercats. Something along those lines. If you look on the shelf, the little red floating guy with the O on his shirt. I mean, he's cute, he's lovable, he's loyal to a fault, he's everybody's best friend.
He doesn't look like a traitor.
And this comic says Orko betrayed them, and I'm thinking, I read it a couple times, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, that really sets up something huge. it was definitely one of those things that you had to know who Orko was for that to be powerful. And I think that last page, and this is a big spoiler here, that last page of the comic where it shows somebody on a throne, it sort of seems like it should be Hordak, because that seems to be who Skeletor's been talking to and communicating with the whole issue. But if you really look closely, you see the red robes, you see the blue hands. I think that's Orko. I think Orko is being set up as a major villain in this comic, which that has me excited. Not because I want to see Orko be a villain, because I love Orko. He's cute. I mean, he's the kind of character that, you imagine little kids would just latch on to, but it definitely shows this comic's willing to do something new and interesting. So, Brad, I have one last question for you, and this is from me. Being introduced to this comic, who are the Masters of the Universe? Who do you think the Masters of the Universe are? This is a big argument that fans always get into. Who are the Masters of the Universe? Who is it referring to?
I guess there's some kind of... I was trying to figure that out as I was reading the comic. I guess it's referring to the group of people that protect the universe that...
So the good guys.
Well, no, the people that protect the universe of not Inertia, but I'm doing it again.
Eternia.
The people that protect the universe of Eternia, like He-Man and Tela and Tila, and it was excuse me again, and it was all those characters together who kind of charged Castle Grayskull at the end. I just figured they were kind of the protectors of that universe to get rid of the forces of evil. That's very generic.
Now I'm going to tell you're wrong.
I probably am.
But no. Masters of the Universe kind of jumps back and forth. It seems the predominant theme among fans is that Masters of the Universe refers to all of the characters. That in the original toys, everybody was like, somebody was like, evil master of the ocean, evil master of... doing this, an evil master doing that, where the good guys would be like heroic master of, hitting people with a hammer, and heroic master of being Fisto.
So they're all the big players within this universe.
The big players.
Good and evil.
Yeah. Now, other than a couple minor references in the 80s, in the 2000 cartoon, and recently it seems that they're trying to actually call the good guys, like you were saying, the Masters of the Universe. Like, that's the name of their team. Like, Masters of the Universe is kind of like, the Avengers or the Justice League or something.
Or the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Or the Guardians of the Galaxy. But I think most fans like the idea of Masters of the Universe as all the characters, because they are all fighting to be Masters of the Universe. They're all the masters.
That makes sense.
They're the best of the best at what they do. And
I like that definition.
Even if, one guy's like evil master of odors. The dude that looks like a skunk and stinks. Stinkor. So, well, I think that's about as much as we're going to talk about it. I hope it gets collected into a trade paperback, because it's one of those that I'll probably buy again as a trade paperback or a nice hardcover collection. I'm excited to see where it goes.
I will say, as a litmus test, it got me interested to hopefully see a very well-written, with a director who cares about the property, Masters movie, because things are there to turn this into a major, even possibly, hopefully better than a Transformers movie type franchise. You have the Rogues Gallery of Villains, and I'm sure there's... Looking at Jerry's figures, there's limitless amounts of interesting Masters of the Universe. Tons of villains,
tons of heroes, tons of characters. It's all there. Just put it together.
So hopefully somebody will.
I'm going to let you borrow the 2000 cartoon, because it's really good. It starts with the origin story, and I think would help you make sense of it. So,
all right, Brad. I'll check that out. All right, let's get into my big thing of the week. My big thing was the 85th Annual Academy Awards that was on ABC last Sunday. Now, a lot of people are saying this is not because of the awards, just because of the presentation of the show. This was the worst Academy Awards ever. Maybe because the tribute to musicals didn't fit into the 2.5, 3 hour time frame of an award show. But I have to say, thank God for Seth MacFarlane. I know a lot of people thought it was a little over the top with some of his humor, but if not for him, this could have went down as the worst Oscar presentation
a lot of people seem
of
to
all
hate
time.
Him.
I'm a Seth MacFarlane fan. I love Ted. I'm a Family Guy fan. Not as big as you are, Jared.
Yeah, I think he's funny.
I've watched American Dad and Cleveland Show here and there, and they're both pretty decent. And
I'm getting back into Family Guy. I was kind of turned off it for a while, but I'm kind of getting back into it. It always makes me laugh. It's so ridiculous. But...
What I liked about MacFarlane's hosting was he was able to make the Oscars, which are usually very uppity and pretentious, into more of a fun show, especially with his opening monologue.
I think that's
stuff.
why people didn't like it, because they kind of like that uppity, pretentious nature.
I mean, that is the Oscars. Like I said in my article on this, the Oscars is not an award show for everyone.
Yeah.
But it was good to see him bring in a host to kind of branch out to a more wider audience. And, oh my God, his opening I thought it was hilarious. It may have been wildly inappropriate, but it was freaking hilarious.
The boob song?
Yeah, the boob song. See, William Shatner, who was portraying Captain Kirk, appeared and said, don't do the song you're about to do, and he showed him a headline from tomorrow morning's paper, Seth MacFarlane, worst Oscar host ever, which literally ended up becoming a headline, unfortunately for Seth. But it was, he broke out into this song, this musical number of just the best topless scenes in movies, like recent topless scenes, and like, only Seth MacFarlane could have pulled that off, especially in front of the pretentious Academy. Are you kidding me?
And he's such a good singer and performer, too.
He's so talented. Talented.
It's just, and very charming. And it just makes that, sense of humor of his all the more just, I guess, wicked, and it's just funny. I
posted on the Facebook page, Seth MacFarlane said he will never host the Oscars again. I hope that's not true. I don't know if the Academy would have him back at this point, but I would love to see him in maybe, 5-10 years. I think Billy Crystal's hosted like 5 or 6 times or something ridiculous like that. So why not have Seth MacFarlane back? I'm telling you, he did a hell of a lot better than James Franco did, who looked stoned the entire time he was hosting with Anne Hathaway a couple years ago. But anyway, enough about the brilliant Seth MacFarlane. Let's get into some of the winners and kind of who we thought should have won and who got snubbed. Let's start with Best Supporting Actor. And before I get into these categories, I'll say I've seen most of these films. I saw every movie that was nominated for Best Picture except for Amour, which was a French language film that no theaters in my local area got until just this past week or so. I want to see Amour, but I did not see it. Won Best Foreign Language Film. But Jerry, going into this kind of Oscar talk, tell people your experience and thoughts on these films.
I haven't seen any of these movies.
Exactly. So that's where we're at. I'm the voice of the Academy, which may be a sad thing, but I'm going to do my best. But you've seen the trailers. You know what you want to see and what you'll find interesting. So, Jerry, just do the best you can.
Okay. I will say the one movie, and I don't know if it was nominated for Best Picture, was Django Unchained?
Yep, it was nominated
that
for
was
Best
the
Picture.
one movie there that I really, really wanted to see. And by the time we got to see it, I've seen every Quentin Tarantino movie probably since Jackie Brown in theaters. Didn't get to go out. We were visiting family members, and nobody else wanted to see it except my wife and I. And it was gone. We had to drive further away, and maybe I'll still be able to catch it in theaters if I'm willing to drive.
Speaking of Django Unchained, that gets us in the Best Supporting Actor.
I thought it might.
Good segue. Christoph Waltz. He for the role of Dr. King Schultz won another Best Supporting Actor nod. He was great in Django. He brings a lot of comedic elements and stuff like that to very tense and gory Quentin Tarantino situations. But this is basically the same shtick that he rode to an Academy Award with Inglourious Bastards in 2008. And it was like he was more of kind of a good guy in this role where he was the Jew hunter in Inglourious Bastards, but it was still kind of
called Nazis, Brad. We call them Nazis these days.
But it's well, Jew hunter was his
with
nickname.
the name. I know.
That was a much better performance. I thought they were both pretty epic, but I don't know. I really would have went with, and I put this in my article. I would have went with De Niro, who played Pat Sr. in Silver Linings Playbook. I mean, when you think of De Niro performances and Academy Award winning, you think of Raging Bull or The Godfather Part 2. These are really tough guy roles. And Jerry, in Silver Linings Playbook, De Niro really branched out. He plays a very OCD, a man who has he struggles with OCD, struggles with gambling problems, and is struggling with his son who just recently had to move back home after dealing with clinical depression. So we get to see this is probably the role that has pushed De Niro past his comfort level, the first role like that in a long time. So I don't know. I would have liked to see him give De Niro the nod, but let's go to Best Supporting Actress. Anne Hathaway won for Fontaine. This was well deserved.
I think she was snubbed. She should have been nominated for Dark Knight Rises.
I would have loved to have seen her nominated for that as well, but this is the Academy Awards, Jerry, not the
Not
MTV
the awards of movies
Movie
that
Award.
people actually watch.
Exactly. Except for me, which is why I'm here. For you guys. So, I mean, she was awesome as Fontaine. I'm not a giant musical or play fan, but I saw this simply because it was nominated for Best Picture. And interesting enough, in Les Mis, what they did is it was all raw audio, recorded on the spot. They didn't do any, most of the time, they record the audio in a studio and then, put it in audio digital recordings over the performances. This was all raw, and it kind of hurt the film. It hurt some people. Oh my God, Russell Crowe was awful, but that's been talked about ad nauseum around the internet. But Anne Hathaway as Fontaine, it benefited her. You could see she can actually sing. She can perform. I mean, it was pretty much a shoo-in. She would win this award. The Academy got it right with this one, and it took a physical toll on her. She cut all of her hair off while they were filming this, and her diet regimen was insane to get real skinny for this kind of this impoverished Fontaine character. Best actress. All right, Jennifer Lawrence, who Jerry is very familiar with Hunger Games. Although, did you even see that,
I haven't even
Jerry?
seen the Hunger Games.
So he hasn't seen.
I think the only movie I saw her in was X-Men.
Mystique and X-Men.
Yeah, First Class. That's like the only movie I've seen her in.
She was great as Tiffany in Silver Linings, but I really had a problem with this one. I really wanted Jessica Chastain to win for Zero Dark 30. I just feel that she was able, and I know I wrote this in the article, but it repeats saying again, I felt like she was able to kind of capture the frustration and emotion that an entire generation was feeling after 9/11, and she captured that and turned it into a drive to find Osama bin Laden. And at the end of Zero Dark 30, there was a scene, to me, it was one of my favorite scenes in the entire year of movies. It's over, and spoiler alert, they get bin Laden.
Well, you should have played the reel first. There's some people out there who don't know that yet.
Okay, they get bin Laden, spoiler alert, so...
If you're listening to this podcast in a cave, we've got bin Laden.
That's right, we got bin Laden, so all the caves are pretty clear now. So, at the end of this film, Jerry, there's a scene, it's all said and done, they got bin Laden. She has been working on this for 10 years, recruited out of high school to do this, and she is emotionally spent. They're like, where do you want to go? What's next? And she's sitting there, tears rolling down her face. She's like, I don't know. This has been my whole adult life. And there'll be plenty of times for, Jennifer Lawrence to win Best Supporting Actress in the future. But, I mean, this was just my one of my favorite performances of the entire year, with segues into something you want to say about Jessica Chastain.
I was going to say just Zero Dark 30 is actually one of those movies that does intrigue me quite a bit. Argo intrigues me.
And we'll get in more of those when we
Zero
talk
Dark
about
30. It intrigues me. I want to see that movie. I just
it didn't get around to our area till real late, so a lot of people didn't get to see it. Let's get into one of the best performances of all time I've ever seen in any movie was Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln. I mean, when you heard he was going to take the role, we all expected something epic, and it did not disappoint. I mean, the research he went into for this role, he visited every place that Lincoln had been his entire life and spent time there. He met with Lincoln historians for years trying to perfect the voice and the mannerisms and things of that nature. And, you know, when they got on set, Spielberg didn't question anything he did one time. And once again, the brilliant Daniel Day-Lewis didn't break character one time on set. He was joking at the Academy Awards. He was being very funny. He's a very funny, just laid-back guy, which you wouldn't expect with this very Academy-like.
That method acting where he literally becomes his character.
And he doesn't do many interviews, but when he does them, he's very personable. He's the total opposite of somebody like a Harrison Ford, who we talked about on this show, is kind of shy and introverted, but he was saying, you know, my wife's had to live with some pretty crazy people over the course of our marriage. And, you know, he thought, because he stays in character at home.
I know.
I mean, that is he's an inspiration to, you know, he was an inspiration to people like the Heath Ledgers of the world who go all in on a part. So, I mean, he'll probably won't do another movie for another 4 or 5 years, but I'm sure it will be well worth it.
Does he have kids? Because you got to wonder, like,
I believe he does have one child. I mean, at the last of the Mohicans, he lived in the woods off of berries for a year before filming.
Yeah,
to get
into that mindset. It's a talent. I was reading about. I mean, Viggo Mortensen kind of, you know, not as hardcore.
He's Daniel Day-Lewis light,
but he kind of did that in Lord of the Rings. I mean, like lived out, you know, outside where everybody else, you know, slept in hotels or something, and learned a sword fight, and, you know, stitched his own clothes or something. So
I'll pose this question to Jerry, and this topic that we're talking about gives away my answer. But Jerry, if I ask you not who your favorite actor is, because we all have our favorites, but, you know, who is the best actor alive right now?
Best actor alive?
I mean, that's something Jerry might have to think about, but I don't know how you could argue against Daniel Day-Lewis. His silence says it all. He can't think of anybody better than Daniel Day-Lewis.
I don't know if I've seen a movie that he's been in. I guess I've seen Last of the Mohicans. You
haven't seen There Will Be Blood or
no.
My Two Left Feet or any where he actually lived in a wheelchair for a year to have people carry him around.
Had to carry him,
to portray a person with a handicap. But, you know, enough about how epic Daniel Day-Lewis is. Let's get to Best Director real quick. Ang Lee surprisingly won for Life of Pi.
And I think he got snubbed for Hulk when that came out.
That was definitely did not deserve a Best Director nomination. I believe he was nominated for Brokeback Mountain.
I think he was.
He actually was not. But he won Best Director this time, which I didn't have a problem with. I mean, no movie to kind of be set up with a simplistic premise. A boy gets stranded on a boat after his ship goes down and his family is lost at sea. To make you to do so much with that premise as far as the visuals, and this movie, Jerry, it pushed the limits of people's belief in God, why they believe in God, if they do, if not, why not, if they do, why. I mean, it asked those questions, and it really, I mean, I've talked to people who are hardcore atheists, and it made them feel the same way. And I've talked to people who were devout believers and of Christianity, and it made them feel the same way. And
doesn't it have a talking tiger in it too?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Which is an allegory for something, which I'm not gonna get into. But see Life of Pi when it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray. Now, Best Director brings me to something interesting, Jerry. I think Ben Affleck should have won. If not, he should at the very least been nominated. 90% of the time when a film is nominated for Best Picture, the director is also nominated for Best Director.
Yeah, I did think that was kind of weird that Ben Affleck did not get nominated. That was an odd
choice by the Academy. And not only they usually not get nominated, they win. Usually if you win Best Director, you win Best Picture. The awards go hand in hand.
Somebody's still mad they had to sit through Armageddon. So.
That's not me. I love him in Armageddon. I gotta say that. But Ben Affleck's come a long way since Armageddon, Jerry. His last 3 movies, Gone Baby Gone, The Town, of course, Argo. I mean, I would think maybe he hasn't proved himself enough to the Academy. But that, along with writing Good Will Hunting, I mean, I don't know, which he did along with one of his best friends, Matt Damon. I don't know what more they want from the guy. But they did reward him when they gave him Best Picture for Argo. And this film was, I mean, it basically turned the Iranian hostage situation, crisis, into like an edge of your seat thrill ride that made you feel like so much was at stake and care about every character. And it was worthy of Best Picture. It was probably, besides Django, and maybe Silver Linings Playbook, it was probably the most entertaining of all the films that were nominated for Best Picture. But Jerry, I would have to go with Zero Dark 30. My reason is because to me Zero Dark 30 provided probably the best commentary on post 9/11 foreign policy and its evolution from 9/11 till the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. It did all that, provided that thought-provoking, smart commentary while being a pulse-pounding, like, Catherine Bigelow action film. So, and Jerry, a lot of people had a problem with this movie because it portrayed the advanced interrogation techniques such as waterboarding. I'll be interested to get your thought on that because, I mean, like it or not, waterboarding was a part of the hunt for bin Laden.
I think it was. I'm not sure if it's someone trying to, people were trying to cover their rear end, or they just didn't like that we were, documenting on film. Because, American movies get shown all over the world. I mean, everybody knew. I really didn't see why it was such a
Academy
big deal.
Is, they're more liberal, and obviously the liberal train of thought is to be against torture and things of that nature. But I mean, it happened. Catherine Bigelow did it very brilliantly, portraying the torture. It wasn't over the top. It was very gritty and realistic, and I don't know. I thought that was unfair.
And a lot of time a movie, you can say something, depict something, or show something, and you don't have to be endorsing it. You don't have to be endorsing it or denouncing it. Sometimes a movie just shows something.
Wes Craven's
allows you to make your own opinions.
Like I was about to say, Wes Craven's not promoting child abduction with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay.
It's part of the movie. Of course, that's a fictional movie.
Yeah.
This actually happened. She's not promoting it. She's just saying, here it is. And we're going to give you an accurate, from what we can tell, an accurate portrayal of it.
Yeah, as much as possible. It's always the difficulty when you're turning anything that's nonfiction into a film. When you're making a fictionalized version of nonfiction, you're always going to have those issues where, was it done right? What do people... look at Argo. All the controversy over Argo about,
They added a lot to that.
Sure, and how much was the U.S. really involved versus, Canada and the UK and a couple other places where their people were more involved with the movie. So it always happens, and I mean I'm not sure why people still make such a big deal about it when it happens.
Exactly, and I give all these filmmakers credit for portraying it in a realistic, believable, and entertaining way. And I mean, I will say this. I said at the beginning when we started talking about the Oscars, it's not an award show for everyone. But if you look hard enough, you will find a work of art, and film is art that can speak to you, and can work for you. And I encourage everybody, Jerry included, go check out some of these Best Picture nominees.
I plan to as they start hitting. Some of them like Lincoln. I mean, I wanted to watch Lincoln, but I think I would enjoy Lincoln more watching it at home where I could pause if needed or, use the bathroom or something like that. I mean, most of the time I like to see movies in theaters, and Brad mentioned earlier, too, we kind of live in an area where we don't always get a lot of these movies.
We have to travel to, a bigger city to see some of the artsier releases.
All of these Academy Award movies come out November and December. Those are the busiest months. We've got Thanksgiving, you got Christmas, you got shopping, you got, work stuff is crazy for me. All people are visiting from out of town. That is the time of year I least have to go watch movies.
It would be better if, the Academy Award, it didn't have to be, in order to get nominated for a film, you didn't have to release it during the holiday season. Why not make it a whole, why not be able to release a movie in March and it still be considered, which it technically can be, but it never works that way.
It doesn't seem like it happens. What's really interesting, and I mean, I just will say to anybody, go back and look at 70s, 80s. Look at the movies that are being nominated. And most of the time you'll see these were movies that were popular with audiences as well as critics. That it seems like...
Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, you'll just see a lot of them, but you'll see that now it's like movies have to be, they come out during a short period. You hardly ever see them in theaters if you live in a smaller area, if you're not in a major metropolitan area. And you just don't get a chance to see those movies, and it just seems like movies are sort of basically created or marketed to be Academy Award-winning movies, and nothing else ever makes it.
Well, the Academy tried to adjust that after 2008 because of The Dark Knight, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought that got snubbed, and it's just like the Academy's like, it was a fantastic movie, but we don't nominate movies like that.
Yeah.
So in order to avoid that, after 2008, they got to where they said, hey, we're going to have 10 Best Picture nominees. And then they later changed it to where, well, it can be between 5 and 10. But, you got to see when it was the full 10, some of the movies like a Toy Story or Up or Avatar, Inception got nominated, and
it gets better. It goes back and forth,
and I think we're at a better place as far as films that are for a wider audience being nominated than we were 5-10 years ago. But we need.
Well, I mean, look a few years back.
More work.
Gladiator. I mean, Best Picture. Gladiator's a
2000.
Great. Yeah, that was a great movie, but. It's interesting. It's one of those that was a great. I like Gladiator. I mean, I know Gladiator's not like the greatest movie of all time or anything, or probably not even the best movie that came out that year. But it was interesting because it was a really popular movie, and it was also nominated for the Academy Award. So I don't know.
Forrest Gump the same way.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like recently a lot of people would not necessarily have heard of the movies that got nominated.
Well, I think, that's about going to do it for the Academy Awards talk. Jerry, is there something else that you've been checking out this week that you wanted to talk a little about?
A couple things I've checked out. One, I've actually got a couple action figures this week. Back to Masters of the Universe. 2 of my Masters of the Universe figures came this week. Remember that Mattel sells these Masters of the Universe classics on a subscription model. That what they've been doing for quite a few years is that they show you a few of the figures for the year, usually at San Diego Comic-Con. There's about a 3 or 4 week period where you can actually go and, use your credit card or debit card and purchase a subscription for the year. You're locked in. and every month you at least get one figure. Just got 2 of them in this month, and they are huge characters in terms of their popularity. The first is Jitsu. Jitsu is a, kind of an Asian character which they don't have an Asian attorney, so I'm not sure what I would call him, but he has kind of a samurai top knot. He has a massive right hand that's gold. It looks like a karate, in like a karate chop pose. It's made of metal. He's just a cool looking figure that has a lot of Asian or samurai influence to his character. The second one is probably the Masters of the Universe Classics character that I've been looking forward to absolutely the most, and it's Ram Man. Ram Man is a huge guy that has metal shoulder pads and a metal head, a metal helmet on, and his whole thing is like he rams things. The original action figure, which it's
kind of like Juggernaut.
Yeah, kind of like Juggernaut. I mean, he's kind of like a Juggernaut type character. He's a good guy. He's thick. I mean, I'm holding him up next to a regular figure, and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, he is like just massive in terms of his, how wide his shoulders are, and his fists are as big as somebody's hands.
And he sold out in around 3 minutes.
I think he sold out in around 3 minutes. Remember, Mattel is selling these off a subscription. So at that day of sale, when those figures come online, I mean, everybody that has a subscription already has their figures. In March, the character Fangman from the Filmation cartoon, he's not even going on sale. They've just said...
Straight to the subscribers.
Yeah, only subscribers. They're not even going on sale with him. Ram Man was a beautiful figure. He was one of the original 8 characters. And this line started at Comic-Con in 2008. And we're just now getting Ram Man, the last of his original 8 characters. He's an awesome figure. I love him. He's fun to pose. I mean, to give him different ramming positions and stuff. Have him hit and stuff. So I'm glad to have Ram Man.
Yeah, he's a very interesting figure. He's going on, I believe now he's on Big Bad Toy Store for around $80.
And I think their price is probably pretty low compared to what you might see
on eBay. Near 100.
I mean, it's just likely we may not, most of these, they're doing them small run. We're probably not going to see him again. So, unless they do a repaint or something of him.
And Jerry, your other figures that you've not had quite as epic experience with.
I have been. I honestly think if somebody said, what is my favorite incarnation of Batman? What is the best Batman thing ever? I love the Arkham Asylum, Arkham City video games. I mean, it's kind of...
That's crazy.
It kind of feels like Batman the Animated Series, but with all of the best aspects of the modern comics and everything involved with them. And for the past few years, DC Direct, now they're DC Collectibles, they've done some awesome figures. They did 2 great waves of figures for Arkham Asylum. They've done 3 waves of figures for Arkham City, along with some deluxe boxed figures. And they just came out with Wave 4 this past week. Deadshot is in there.
A beautiful looking figure.
Yeah, great Deadshot. Looks just like the in-game model. Nightwing, they have the Nightwing figure who appears in some of the challenge stages in the game. They're kind of like bonus stages that you can play. Batman, there's another version of Batman, which, DC Collectibles always has to put a Batman in each wave. But he's more articulated than any of the previous Batmans. I didn't get him in Nightwing. I just got Deadshot and a figure who has only ever appeared one time before. She was a figure in the Batman animated series in a boxed set. She was kind of a repaint of Poison Ivy, I think, and it's Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter. So I was really excited because here's one of those characters I did not own an action figure of that was in my 6 to 7 inch Batman collection. I got her. I opened the package, and the hinge pin in her right knee was snapped. If you look at it, it is made of this clear plastic. This clear plastic that seems really brittle. And so I contacted the folks who I bought it from. I bought it from Big Bad Toy Store, and they were really cool. They said, hey, just send us a pic, let us know what's going on. As I was taking a picture of her right knee, her right shoulder fell off. I took a picture of that as well. Once again, it is this weird clear plastic.
Maybe it's not the sturdiest for articulation. It's
I
not
don't
looking
think so.
like.
Because I have had, I know a lot of people talk about that they've had problems with DC Direct figures. I have a lot of DC Direct figures for years. I've collected them. I've had a lot of DC Direct statues and things. I've never had problems with them until last year when I bought the DC Collectibles Killer Croc. And as soon as I took it out of the package, I mean, it was a $50, $60 figure. It was massive.
It's a massive figure.
Well, took it out of the package, and the right arm was just off. Like, it was already snapped.
And who did you contact at that point?
Well, at that point, I had bought it at Collector's World.
Jim was Collector's World.
Before I tried to contact Collector's World, I actually tried to contact DC Collectibles. Because, you know what? If you have a problem with Mattel product, you contact Mattel. Hasbro product, you contact Hasbro. NECA, Mezco, those companies, you can get in touch with them. I could not find any information to get in touch with DC Collectibles. Nothing. No website that has contact information. The only answer I finally got from like an email address was, take it back to where you bought it. Which, with action figures sold...
Very in-depth customer service. Thank you, DC
I was
Direct.
not real happy... because, once again, Killer Croc was hard to get when he first came out. You know, my comic shop only had one figure.
Be able to get one right away, you know?
Now I've been told Big Bad Toy Store is one of the best places online. If you don't have a local comic shop near you, buy from Big Bad Toy Store. Great shipping, great customer service. I have never had an issue with them. I think the only place you get better customer service is if you were dealing with somebody you actually knew. But I don't know. Since the summer, DC Collectibles, maybe since they became DC Collectibles from DC Direct, I have had 3 Arkham City figures have been defective. And I just haven't seen this many defective figures in a line. That wasn't something that, happened to every figure in the line. I mean, if there's a little paint app missing, or, there's something like the shoulders reversed on a figure, that kind of stuff happens.
Now, is this to the point where you will quit buying or DC Direct items? I mean,
you know what? After buying Killer Croc this summer and having problems with them, I didn't rebuy Killer Croc. I didn't buy their Titan Joker figure because I was afraid.
And you wanted these figures.
I really would. I would add them. The Arkham look, that look from Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, is like my favorite Batman look anywhere. I mean, they just have a beautiful blend of the comic depiction, with a realism to them as well. This time I said, well, I'm just going to get Deadshot and Talia because I only have the DC Universe Classics Deadshot, and, he's more comic book looking than this one is, which looks like the in-game figure.
Which are very realistic.
Yeah,
portrayals.
I don't know. I just have some issues with DC Collectibles lately, and it kind of makes me worry because, the figures, you're talking 25, I think these were about $22
If you buy
a piece.
a case over 100, the case
of
4.
Yeah, case of 4 is about 80 most places.
Okay.
80 to 100.
With shipping, though, you're pushing 100.
You're paying shipping with these unless you get them at a local shop. But, I don't know. DC Collectibles has just really been disappointing me lately. Shoulder fell off my Killer Croc. I got Azrael, and one of his blades on his gauntlet was already ripped in the package. And then Talia's shoulder broke off as well. Always looks like this weird, clear, brittle plastic. So I'm just saying, DC Collectibles, you need to check this out. Because I've left a lot of figures on the shelves at comic shops because I said, well,
it's DC Collectibles.
I'm a little concerned. So I love this stuff. I have a ton of DC Collectible stuff. They've made some of my favorite Batman figures ever, but lately I've been a little concerned about buying the product.
So I think it's kind of needless to say, DC Collectibles is not confirmed epic right now. So
not at this point.
Let me get into one other thing I've been checking out this week. It was Here Comes the Boom, Kevin James' latest effort, and it was a movie that I checked out at a video store. Believe it or not, they still have those.
You checked it out?
Yep. A family member checked it out and said, Brad, check this out. I think you'll like it. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't have much to do this past Saturday, so I said, what's the worst? I lose an hour and 45 minutes of my life, and I checked it out. I was quite surprised. I was kind of expecting this dumbed down Kevin James like King of Queens type comedy, but it ended up being a very strong drama. And I mean, where the comedy was more used as a backdrop, you know. I mean, the film basically, to set it up real quick, is a school's troubling, having a lot of financial woes, like most are in this economy, and they're having to lay off a music teacher. So in order for that, and cut a music program in general.
And who's the music teacher they're getting ready to lay off?
Henry
Winkler.
The one and only Henry Winkler, best known for being Fonzie on Happy Days.
They're going to probably hire a younger teacher at a lower rate who would probably be played by Scott Baio.
They weren't going to hire Chachi. They were just getting rid of the position. So what happens is, you know, Kevin James says pretty much, you know, we'll figure out a way to raise the money. In order to do so, he decides, let's try some MMA, some UFC type fighting. And, you know, that's not really the driver of the movie. It's really about, you know, this guy who in 2002 was Teacher of the Year, who has become burnt out on the profession, very apathetic about it, and burnt out on our educational system in America. But he is able to kind of rekindle when he's fighting to save, you know, a program that's so important to some of his students, because a lot of the music kids are in his science class. You know, it really rekindles the fire and passion. So we see him go from a burnout educator back to the Teacher of the Year, all while fighting up to the UFC in the process. And it doesn't, I know from describing it, it doesn't sound like a great movie, but it really was. And it was kind of, you know, interesting to see Kevin James branch out a little bit. He's a decent actor.
Well, I haven't seen the movie, but I was reading your review on theepicreview.com, and I actually really thought, you know, this does sound good. I mean, it was a movie that, I probably would have never seen this movie at all.
Same here.
Probably would have even passed on it at Netflix, but the way you talked about it, about somebody that was so passionate at one point about something that they did, and, you know, when adversity comes, they decide to, you know, really put themselves on the line and regain their passion in the process. I thought that really does sound like something that could appeal to a lot of people, because burnout, I mean, people get burned out in their professions, in their marriages, in their relationships, whatever they're doing. And I mean, it sounds like it addresses burnout in a fun way, about looking for something that was important, what you first loved in, you know, what you're doing now.
Yeah, you hit the central theme of the movie on the head.
I hit it.
Just as hard as Kevin James did in his UFC fights.
Right.
I mean, the movie is pretty much about, you know what, do what you're passionate about. Try your very best to live your dream. And I know it sounds cliche, but it was done really well. Gary Valentine, who was Danny Heffernan, Doug's cousin on the King of Queens, and this plays his brother. And it was cool to see that mini King of Queens reunion. My family and I even enjoy that show. It's for being as simplistic as it is.
Funny show.
It was a good network comedy. And you know, Gary Valentine's character is running a painting business that he inherited from his dad, but he had went to culinary school and he wanted to be a chef. And this is kind of a side plot, but, you know, him seeing what his brother is doing at school and rekindling that passion inspires him to pursue being a chef. And, you know, whether it's, you know, MMA fighting, you know, podcasting, you want to write a comic, whatever you want to do, you know, I'm not saying you gotta ditch your profession to do it, but try to work on that dream, and that's what I got out of it.
Brad, would you become an MMA fighter to save this podcast? Put me on the spot.
I mean, as long as I knew I could live through it, I would. I think I would.
As long as you knew you could live through it.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Jerry's got one other thing he's been checking out this week. Real quick, Jerry, what was that?
Well, this is one of those little things that you know, I mean, you married to somebody and you become really interested in, you know, you become interested in some of their interests. my wife is a huge Neil Gaiman fan. I mean, it doesn't matter. And it has been a really cool thing because her being interested in Neil Gaiman, initially, some of the screenplays he wrote and novels, has really got her interested in comic books, in general. So
medium she wasn't really into.
She wasn't really into comic books that much. So she's moved into, reading through all of Sandman, and then she's like, well, I'd like to read some of the things that Neil Gaiman's done with Batman, which has just been really cool. It's been something we've definitely bonded over. We actually met Neil Gaiman not too long ago. Oh my gosh, it was brilliant.
Know this.
There was a tour. It was called... there was a storytelling tour, and they came to Charlotte, and it was Neil Gaiman, and it was just a number of other storytellers as well, and all they did was get up and told, really neat, just personal stories, and it was in kind of a small auditorium down in Charlotte, and we hung around after the show, and some of the storytellers were coming out, and people were leaving, and my wife had one of the massive DC Absolute Sandman editions with her.
They're beautiful, by the way.
And I had my copy of Whatever Happened to the Cape Crusader, and Neil Gaiman came out, and he drew in my wife's book, and we took some pictures, and he was just the nicest guy. We had a really great time. So I have become a really big Neil Gaiman fan well.
Does Neil Gaiman, does he do art, or he just writes?
You know what?
Right?
He mainly just writes, but he does, I don't know that he does art for like his books and stuff, comics, but he does do some sketches or some some drawings every now and then.
Just wanted to clarify.
He drew in my wife's one of her Absolute Sandman books. He drew a really cool little Sandman.
So what work of Neil Gaiman have you been checking out
this week? My wife had asked for a bunch of Neil Gaiman books for Christmas, and she got most of what she asked for. And this is a book called Black Orchid. It's actually a newer edition, a deluxe edition. The book originally came out in 1988 and 1989 as a three-issue series. It really paved the way for Vertigo Comics.
And this collects all of those issues.
This collects all three of them. But Black Orchid is just a really neat book. Neil Gaiman's with Dave McKean, who a lot of people probably remember his art from Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth.
Written by Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison, yeah. Dave McKean does some gorgeous artwork. Black Orchid is really cool in that it took a character, at least the name of a character, who'd been around in the DC Comics universe for a while, the Black Orchid, and really took this character who had no origin story, no background, no super defining feature other than that she usually could blend in and, that's kind of her thing. She blended in, she put on disguises and captured criminals. Neil Gaiman does an awesome story. It starts with her dying and continues from there. As she, it gets very supernatural. If you really liked Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, if you're a fan of Justice League Dark, obviously if you're a Neil Gaiman fan, but if you like any of DC's more mystical characters, this is an awesome book. It does some different things with the superhero genre, and I know that, obviously it came out in 1988 and 89. Most people have read it, but you can get this beautiful new version. It came out in 2012. It's just a gorgeous-looking book, gorgeous art.
Dave McKean does the art for this, and it fits Neil Gaiman very well.
It does.
It's beautiful.
It fits the tone of the book. It has some cool intersections. I mean, Batman shows up in the book. Lex Luthor's in the book. Mad Hatter, Poison Ivy, Swamp Thing. But it's also a really cool story that I think my wife will enjoy it. She hasn't read it yet, even though she doesn't know all of those characters. Actually, she probably does know all of those characters.
Being married to you, I think so.
Yeah. But it's just worth checking out. Just one of those things that I picked up this week and was reading and really enjoyed it.
So go on Amazon and look for Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean's Black Orchid, the deluxe edition. It retails for around $25, but you can probably get it for $20 or so on Amazon.
Talk to your local comic shop, and they may have some other, some other options for you as well.
Jim Waz Collector.
Jim might be able to hook you up with one in Gastonia, North Carolina.
If you're in the area, check out that from Jim, Black Orchid. But let's continue this, what looks like is going to be a giant size edition of
the podcast.
Of the Confirmed Epic podcast. Because It's just a big week.
This is not fun size. This is king size.
We had a lot of stuff we've been checking out a lot. A ton of news this week. And, of course, we got our Snitch review coming up later in the show. But let's get into epic news. And there's a lot of stuff, as I said. There's two big things, really, that was really pressing this week to me. Megan Fox has been cast as the one and only April O'Neil in the new, I won't say Teenage Mutant, let's just say Ninja Turtles movie. And it looks like the route they're going to go with this is the story is going to be more about Casey and April, a Casey Jones and April O'Neil love story, with the Turtles kind of as a Transformers-like backdrop. Jerry, what do you think of Megan Fox as April O'Neil, and what do you think about this potential plot using the Turtles as a backdrop of a love story?
I hate the idea of taking the Turtles as a backdrop. If the Turtles could carry their own movie in the early 90s.
But Michael Bay would say it worked in Transformers, but did it? Keep going.
It made money then, but you know what? The Turtles are stars. The Turtles have always been stars. The Turtles need to continue to be stars. And my hope is that at this point Nickelodeon they own the Turtles now, right? Nickelodeon has all the rights to them. And my hope is that Nickelodeon steps in. Nickelodeon is doing great things with the show,
which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But Paramount owns Nickelodeon, and Viacom owns Paramount. So Viacom owns the
whatever
Turtles.
Happens, I'll have the new comic book series. And I have to say, a few months ago, my wife and I sat down. We watched through all 4 of the Turtles movies, all 4 of them.
Including the animated
the animated version, which I think is fantastic. I love TMNT. The first Turtles movie is so perfect. It really is. I mean, it is amazing. I think you could watch it. It holds up as well, and I enjoy it more today than I probably did as a kid. When this is no joke, my dad took me the first showing. I was in a Ninja Turtle costume. I got so excited, I threw up outside the theater, and it had to take me home and get me calmed down and took me back for a later showing.
That is a epic story, Jerry.
It's a weirdly personal story. I'm not sure how I feel about Megan Fox in this role. I'm not willing to discount her.
I am.
Okay, well, you can be willing to discount her. I mean, it would depend on me who what all was going into it, who was actually directing her. I saw Jennifer's body.
It's going to be Joe Liesman, who has directed...
Battleship?
No, he directed Wrath of the Titans, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, and those works of art, so...
I don't know. I mean, I kind of want somebody... You know who'd be a good April O'Neil?
Who?
Amy Adams.
Oh,
what do you think? Would she not be a good April O'Neil?
Too bad she's already playing Lois Lane. Oddly enough, since you bring that up, Jessica Biel pretty much threw it out there that she wanted to play the role. They never had her into audition, and it's Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen's little sister. I believe it's Elizabeth Olsen. She's been in a few things. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But she read for the role as well. Elizabeth Olsen did. And I don't think Jessica Biel or Elizabeth Olsen would have been the best April O'Neils, but I do think they may have been better than Megan Fox. I don't know. To me, Megan Fox just doesn't fit the April O'Neil mold. To me, April is modest. She's likable, a compassionate person. She's not too flashy, Jerry.
Yeah, that's true. The more you talk about it, the more I'm thinking, I don't know that I see Megan Fox in that role. I was just trying to see what other movies I recognize. If I recognized Elizabeth Olsen from anything, and I don't. But
she's new on the scene, but she's in the smaller artsy films like Silent House and liberal arts in particular, she's gaining a following. So this would have probably been her biggest role, but she didn't get it, unfortunately.
I'm not going to jump out there and discount Megan Fox because, I don't know. But I'm not, it's not casting news where I'm like, oh, that's a perfect fit.
It just seems like at this point that this has officially become a Michael Bay film and not a Ninja Turtles film.
That definitely crossed my mind. That definitely crosses my mind when you say it like that. This is something different now.
So hopefully, she does look good in yellow.
Why would you put the turtles in the background? I mean, why make your own movie about a love story with some aliens?
Michael Bay has a blueprint for making money called the Transformers franchise, and he's going to follow that blueprint, and he could give a damn what the fans of the property
it's called the
thinks.
Armageddon issue.
No, that's not.
Come on, you got to admit that asteroid was in the background of the whole movie. And, you make a movie about an awesome killer asteroid, and then
kids were not lining up around the block to buy the Harry Stamper action figures.
Hey, maybe not in your neighborhood, buddy, but
they are Bumblebee and Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
But that was a side tangent.
All those background characters.
Speaking of Ninja Turtles, the Nickelodeon, some good Ninja Turtles, some good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles news. Nick has renewed the new series for both a second and third season. And each season is going to consist of 22 episodes. So that's 44 more episodes of TMNT goodness we're guaranteed. And the second season is going to introduce Casey Jones. So
yes! I am so excited. I love Casey Jones. He is like the coolest character.
So, Jerry has not got a shot to check out this show, but I have, and I absolutely dig it. It kind of not quite as well as the new IDW comic, but in a kind of a different way. It pays homage to the old show. It makes Turtles something new, and it pays some homage to the comic book in a way, too.
Hey, here's the cool thing. Last night we were at Walmart, and my wife said they had a big floor display that was just a bunch of Turtle stuff, like pillows and hats and dishes and things, which is just really cool to see all that random stuff. We get over there, and, it's nearly empty. And we're kind of playing around with, putting the turtle hats on. And, my wife was taking a picture of one of the turtle pillows. And, there's just kids coming by, going crazy over this stuff.
The turtles are back.
Yeah, it is so cool to see the turtles back. I can't tell you how good it feels to see kids, they walk around and they're in turtle shirts and stuff. It's that's so neat to see a part of your childhood because
revived.
Yeah, revived. I was originally there. I remember walking in. It was a little independent toy store by my grandmother's house, and we walked in there, and there are the turtles, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so cool. And I never heard of them before. I was pretty young. I probably would have been
5, 6.
Probably 6. Probably 6 years old, 5 or 6 or something, yeah. And
when I was a kid, same way, I had turtle everything.
Well, my one grandmother, she bought me April and Splinter and Bebop and Rocksteady and Shredder and one of the turtles. And she said, well, they're all the same. They just have different colored headbands. So I only got one of the turtles from her. But I got all the other characters. And then my other grandmother, because both my grandmothers...
Which turtle was it? Do you remember?
It was probably Raphael, and he's always been my favorite. Because he is cool, but he is also rude.
Yeah.
And I like that about him. But, so I went back to my other grandmother, and she took me back and bought me the other 3 turtles. So I racked up the whole first series in one day.
If you still had those in the box, they'd be worth about 80 a piece, maybe 100 a piece. I saw a whole lot of those go for $600.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
It is cool to see, like you said, a part of your childhood revived, and which kind of, gets me to beg the question, Michael Bay, why screw this up? Why screw this up? We got a great comic book, great figures for kids and collectors, and we have an awesome new show. Please don't ruin this franchise for a generation, Michael Bay, please. All right, but let's move on from the Turtles and talk about another big news item of the week, Jerry. And I will say, before this starts, the next 5-10 minutes or so contain spoilers for Batman Incorporated. I believe it's issue number 8, written by Grant Morrison. Jerry, DC announced this week that in Batman Incorporated number 8, Grant Morrison would be killing off Damian Wayne. Killing off who, believe it or not, has become a character who has become my favorite Robin at this point.
Of all time?
He's actually my favorite of all time. I know I just found him very interesting. He's a very kind of like... he kind of has the brutality of a hit girl with kind of the thinking ability of a Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting. But Jerry,
I think Damian is a good character. I mean, he's not a character that I would want in every Batman book. I wouldn't want to see him in every Batman book all the time. But I like that he kind of always represents to me a reminder for Bruce of, if Bruce lost his code, if Bruce lost his, his unwillingness to take human life, this is the road that he could walk down. And it also gives somebody for Bruce. I mean, it's one thing to model, your own code and the way you live, but it's another thing to have to model, the way you live and a code of ethics when it's your child, when it's somebody who, is related to you and that you're responsible for bringing them up. So I think it adds a really cool dynamic. I know Damian's been around for a few years now because he first popped up in Batman and Son. And, of course, Grant Morrison brought him into this world. And Grant Morrison maybe wants to be the one to take him out. But if you remember in, was it Batman issue, I think it was Batman 666,
where it showed Damian Wayne
in the
taking
future.
The mantle of the Bat.
So we have to wonder, Damian might die, but is he going to come back in a Lazarus pit? I mean, if he was really going to die and it was going to be a major issue, it seems like DC wouldn't have necessarily revealed that. But then again, they want to sell a lot of books. So
I'm sure Batman Inc. number 8 will be flying off the shelf at Jim Wa's Collector's World in Gastonia, North Carolina.
I'm pretty confident that, even though you don't always understand what he's doing, I'm pretty sure that Grant Morrison knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
He's not
Nobody
just
else
doing
does.
it. Yeah, he's not just doing it for sales. He's not just doing it for shock value. Grant Morrison seems to always have a plan and things work out.
What I say about Grant Morrison, I tweeted, I despise you, Grant Morrison, because you are the smartest dumb writer in comic books. I mean, the man is brilliant. Probably the most intelligence-wise, probably as far as I know from interviews and things I've read of various writers, artists, maybe the most intelligent man in the comic book industry. He actually has his own convention. But Grant Morrison...
What is it? Was it called? Like Morricon or
yeah,
something?
I think it's Morricon.
Are you serious?
Yeah, something like that.
I just think it's funny that his Wikipedia thing says he's a Scottish comic book writer, playwright, and occultist. Like, what?
I'm not a Grant Morrison cultist cult follower. I will say that, to me, this just really ticked me off because, okay, I understand the argument. You brought Damian into this world, you can take him out, but you've given this great character, Grant Morrison, Damian Wayne, to so many writers to work with, whether it's Peter Tomsay and Batman and Robin, whose whole book is predicated off that dynamic between Damian and Bruce, or some of the smaller stuff that is still there that Batman, Scott Snyder, has done with Damian and Batman. And you're like, you know what, you can't use him anymore because I'm going to kill him off. And that's your right as the creator, but it just seems kind of messed up at the same time.
I mean, I just think they're going to...
Especially in the New 52 where all this started, Batman Incorporated and all of Grant Morrison's stuff was before the New 52.
But it's all still happening. So, okay, here's the question. Batman Incorporated. I have read the first Batman Incorporated trade.
I haven't read that, so you're more experienced than
So I have not read...
Batman Inc.
But Batman Incorporated seems to kind of take place in the old continuity.
I think they continued it over.
They can just continue because they continued most of the Batman stuff has still happened. Just the time frame has condensed. That's the way I understand it.
And the series started being renumbered and brought into the New 52.
Yeah,
but it was a continuation of the previous story.
It was like Volume 2 or something.
Yeah, it was set up in a very weird way, and I don't know, sometimes I love some of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run was fantastic. But to me, sometimes Grant Morrison is a little too smart for his own good. And I don't know, I don't know what would be a good analogy. What's a person who has created a character? It would be like, all right, Mike Mignola saying, I created Hellboy. I'm gonna, of course, Hellboy is he in BPRD? He's not.
Not anymore. He'd been in it for
but he was, right?
Very little.
Okay, well, let's just say for argument's sake that Hellboy is in BPRD. Okay?
Okay.
And that is
Let's go with this argument.
That is just set up. I'm sure I could find a better way to argue this point.
Okay.
And then, Mike Mignola's like, I'm going to kill off Hellboy so nobody else can use him in BPRD, even though BPRD has been predicated on having Hellboy in the book, which I know none of that has happened. This is just argument. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's quite
Mike Mignola has killed off Hellboy.
Okay, well, that's a spoiler. I didn't know that. I've read the first graphic novel.
But now it's Hellboy in Hell. Ah, yeah.
So Hellboy lives on in hell, and I apologize if I just made a awful fake Hellboy analogy, but I think the listeners get the point.
Well, I do agree with the fact that there's a team of writers that have a book called Batman and Robin, with the whole thing being
Peter Tomsey, Patrick Gleason.
It's Bruce and Damian. So maybe they're going to bring Red Robin. I mean, maybe it's going to be Tim Drake.
I've read that Red Robin's coming back for at least an issue,
okay.
Tim Drake, and then Batman's going to do a team up with Red Hood, and then nobody knows where it's going to go after that. So I guess it will be interesting to see where it goes, but I'm a person who buys that book to see the dynamic between Bruce and Damian.
It's a good dynamic.
And I may drop
really done
that
something
book.
Special with it.
I will see where it goes, like right after the death. And they said after he's killed, the issue will be just a pictures only issue. It'll be just art only. It's supposed to be very powerful. And I'm sure
the next issue, the issue he's killed, or the issue after?
The issue after he's killed in Batman and Robin, which I believe will be Batman and Robin number 18. And he's killed off in Batman Incorporated number 8.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I'm a little ticked at Grant Morrison, but we all know in comics people never stay dead too long. So, Damian Wayne will be back at some point. I actually hope I'm always a big fan of keeping people dead for a while, even though you have to eventually bring them back. But I would love to see Damian Wayne return sooner rather than later. That's just one man's opinion. Speaking of more comic book related news, Jerry, the first photos of the new Amazing Spider-Man suit were released from Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man, set for release May 2nd, 2014. Jerry, I have to say, when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is Spider-Man right off the comic book pages.
Yeah, that was my reaction to looking at it.
And Jerry's not as big a Spider-Man fan as I am.
I like Spider-Man, but I'm not a massive Spider-Man fan like Brad is. And I mean, it looks good. If this is what the movie looks like, and is it going to be is Spider-Man CG in this, or is he a guy? Is he really a dude in a costume?
Yeah, he's a dude in a costume.
It looks awesome. I mean, it really looks good. I didn't mind. I liked the look of the suit from Amazing Spider-Man.
To me, I had this conversation with Andrew Stokes, who writes for the site. We always said that it was
Power Rangers the movie Spider-Man.
Yeah, you know how in Power Rangers the movie they had different suits than they did on the TV show. It was the movie version of Power Rangers. This felt like, let's create a movie version of the suit for Spider-Man.
I mean, does this look more like the Sam Raimi movie suit to you?
To me, I'll tell you what I thought it looked like. When I first saw it, I saw the eyes. And
Todd McFarlane.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank
you. That's exactly what. Thank you for backing my point up. I got into a huge debate on Facebook with Andrew Stokes, again, who writes for the site, covers video game stuff for us, about, I posted, I'm still geeking out over this Todd McFarlane-like Spider-Man, because to me, Todd McFarlane, he modernized Spider-Man. He made him into that skinny but still muscular tone and gave him the big eyes and the suit that we all associate with Spider-Man. And Andrew Stokes, our writer, goes off on a very tirade, just a tirade about how this is Mark Bagley's Ultimate Spider-Man. That's what it's based off of. That's the most recognizable incarnation of Spider-Man. And I said, I love Mark Bagley's art. He actually, I met him a couple times, great guy, and he did a sketch for Andrew Stokes at HeroCon last year. But I will say, I think the better way to phrase it is Todd McFarlane's art laid the groundwork for Mark Bagley's art in Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking at the pictures again, and I definitely, the McFarlane was the first one that jumped out at me. I'm looking at the Mark Bagley. I can see the Bagley evolution here. I can see that the Bagley evolved from the McFarlane.
But you saw the McFarlane.
That's what I thought of. That's what I thought of.
And that made me geek out, It's definitely the best looking Spider-Man movie suit. I love the Raimi suit. Jerry posed the question, do I think it looks like the Raimi suit? It kind of, from the spider is so much bigger on the front of this than it is the Raimi suit. And that is very noticeable because it's bigger in the comics. In the Raimi suit, it was smaller. What I was very interested to see is what is the back gonna look like? Because a lot of time in the comic book, Spider-Man's back has the fatter spider on his back, not tick-like, but kind of a bigger spider. Same way in the '90s cartoon, but it is gonna have. The back of this suit's going to be kind of close to the back of the Raimi suit.
I think this is hands down my favorite Spider-Man.
Which is that, Jerry?
It's from a Japanese movie where he's fighting like a guy with a skull.
That is Spider-Man Blasphemy awesome. By Jerry Reed. But, the suit is fantastic. Let's just hope the movie, on the other hand, sounds like it is not going to be all that great. They just announced today that they have cast Norman Osborn, and that's going to be Chris Cooper, most recently known for playing the villain Tex Richmond in the Muppet movies. He also appears in a few of the Bourne movies, and Chris Cooper is not a very well known actor, but he's a prolific actor. He's in a lot of things, and I think he'll be a okay Norman Osborn, but he will. It's going to be hard to live up to William Dafoe, Jerry. He was a very, very strong Norman Osborn, I believe.
William Dafoe is...
He's a different level actor than Chris Cooper is.
He's a good actor. He's kind of... I like him, and he's kind of creepy, too.
He can do creepy crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Which was perfect.
Remember the Family Guy where Stewie says, remember that time that Willem Dafoe is living under my bed? Stewie's laying in the bed. Willem Dafoe's head just pops out, and he goes, "Hey, Stewie, you asleep yet?" And Stewie's like, "Nope." And he goes, "Just checking." And then he just kind of slides back under the bed. And anytime I see Willem Dafoe, I think about that because it's kind of creepy.
We always love Family Guy references on this podcast.
There's a lot of them.
But, Jerry, at this point this is the characters being introduced. Harry Osborn, maybe being Venom.
Maybe.
Norman Osborn.
Green Goblin, potentially, in the future.
Potentially. Mary Jane Watson, Paul Giamatti as Rhino and Jamie Foxx as Electro.
That's a lot of people in one movie.
That's already
to introduce,
and you have to already continue to develop the Aunt May relationship, which they ignored kind of in the first one, and you have to build the Gwen and Peter love story or potentially love triangle with Mary Jane coming into the picture. So that's a lot on Mark Webb's plate, and based on his first body of work, I'm not too excited, but I am beyond stoked for this suit. Let's get into some more comic book movie news. Guillermo del Toro. I always have trouble with his name. The guy who directed Hellboy.
He's directed Hellboy, directed Blade 2, Hellboy 1 and 2.
Pan's Labyrinth?
Blade 2. Pan's Labyrinth, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. Kronos, which is an awesome vampire movie.
He's an excellent filmmaker. But Del Toro has pitched a Justice League Dark movie to Warner Brothers. It will reportedly feature Swamp Thing, Deadman, Constantine, and the demon Etrigan, among others that are yet to be announced yet. Jerry, you are familiar with a lot of the mystical DC characters and the Justice League Dark series in general, so what's your take on all this?
Man, I love this idea. I mean, the minute you said this, I thought this was really cool. Because that to me is one of the things that DC could do really well to get themselves into movies, is give us characters who a director or writer can do a lot with. I mean, yeah, there's a ton of Swamp Thing material out there. There's a ton of Etrigan material. But does your average person know who Swamp Thing and Etrigan are? Swamp Thing maybe, because the Wes Craven movie, there was a TV series. So older moviegoers probably will know. But like Etrigan, some of those guys, Deadman, absolutely not. This is a great chance to really bulk up some B and C level DC characters and shoot them up to A-list status. I mean, I think it's awesome. I love everything Guillermo del Toro comes out with. I mean, the man just, has just such a cool vibe in his directing, his design work.
He has a knack for the creepy and paranormal.
He does. He can I think he can think characters like Swamp Thing, and I think he could really humanize them. He does awesome design work. I mean, just look at his work on Hellboy, Blade 2, some of those types of things, and I'm really excited if this goes through.
I'm excited. I mean, we don't know if he will direct it, but he's apparently at least written up an outline of what he would want to do.
He does a lot of producing. There are a lot of movies come out that he produces and writes.
Most recently, Mama.
Yeah, I think Orphanage. I think he directed Orphanage.
I think he did. Yeah, he did direct Orphanage. Yeah, I mean, he was a perfect fit for this film, Jerry. Del Toro.
He did not direct The Orphanage.
Oh, he didn't? My apologies.
He just presented it.
He is directing the robot fighting
Pacific Rim, which is one of the coolest looking movies of this year.
Yeah, I'm
excited.
Looking forward to that. But, all right, let's cover another, like I said, it's a lot of news this week. Let's talk about some X-Men Days of Future Past. Apparently, Peter Dinklage, best known for playing the imp Tyrion Lannister on Game of Thrones, is in the running to play either Bolivar Trask, who created the Sentinels, who we know will play a role in Days of Future Past, or maybe even Mr. Sinister. All right. Both of these characters, Trask and Sinister, are, normal-sized guys. Mr. Sinister is a pretty big guy in the comics. So it's kind of begs the question is, why are they getting a smaller person to play this role? And Bryan Singer, the director Bryan Singer, says that he will play a normal-sized character, Jerry.
I think that's the thing that's weird to me, is just when they say, well, he's going to play a normal-sized character. So, are they planning on, using CG? Or I'm just curious what they're doing.
That's the only way I could see around, which makes more sense with the Mr. Sinister, but Trask is a regular guy. I mean, he's not a mutant or anything. He created the Sentinels, so he's my favorite character on Game of Thrones, playing Tyrion Lannister.
I'm reading something from Variety.com that says that he is supposed to possibly play the main antagonist. So I don't know who that would be.
Whether that's Sinister or Trask, we don't know.
So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
It will be. And last but not least, there's a tidbit of Star Wars news, Jerry.
Oh, let's bring it on.
The rumored spin-off film of the week, this week, is a film based on...
They're going to do a movie a week? That's crazy.
That's right. Disney is doing a movie a week.
Star Wars movie every week.
Starting in 2015. We're joking, but it seems that way. It's going to be about a movie a year, though.
Week 12, Max Rebo, the origin story.
Lobot.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Lobot goes to camp.
Yeah,
Lobot goes to jail. Lobot scared stupid.
They just redubbed the Ernest movies.
Yeah, with Lobot's barber shop.
But it's going to be a spin-off film, potentially, as rumored, of Knights of the Old Republic video. I played the game. It's been a while. Jerry, did you play the game?
Absolutely, both of them.
What do you think about this working as a movie?
Hey, I think it's a brilliant idea because you have a big fan base. Star Wars fans have really taken Knights of the Old Republic and embraced it.
When does Knights, for people who don't know, when does Knights of the Old Republic take place? Knights
of the Old Republic takes place 4,000 years before the events of Star Wars: A New Hope. So it takes place in the distant past, but it's still very familiar. The video game has a lot of elements. Yeah, droids look different, technology's a bit different, but things are still the same in a lot of ways. And it's a cool story because you've got Jedi running around, you've got Sith, you've got some really cool factions and some characters that have become really popular. Bastila Shan, Darth Revan, Darth Malak. A lot of cool characters there. You got already the groundwork laid down, and you don't have to worry about running into situations where you're having to recast somebody that's already been in a movie. Everybody's new, everybody's fresh.
And I think you brought up Darth Malak and Darth Revan. Yeah. We'll get the chance to see some really interesting Sith antagonists in this movie, and that is the thing that intrigues me the most. Will they be Vader? No, but could they be the most interesting since Darth Maul? Maybe.
That could be.
And I don't know. That excites me. It's all speculation. I said Star Wars rumor a week.
I think it's a really natural place to go. I would, as a Star Wars fan, as somebody who loves the original movies and cherishes them, I would be much happier to see Star Wars grow in this direction, as far in the past or far in the future, rather than see it try to constantly, intertwine into the worlds already established in the movies.
So we'll be keeping a look on the next Star Wars rumor of the week and probably be talking about it next week. But let's move on from epic news and continue this giant-size edition of the Confirmed Epic podcast. Let's get into our featured review of the week, which is the latest work of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the film Snitch.
I should have never taken that package. I'm not a drug dealer. I swear to you, Dad. You believe me, right?
Of course I believe you. This is a federal case. The mandatory minimum laws are very simple. Jason is facing 10 years in prison. 10 years?
Get down! On the ground! United States versus Jason Collins.
I believe in the mandatory minimum laws.
Please, I just want to help my son.
We need your son to help us make arrests before we can help him reduce his sentence.
Well, like setting someone up? I won't do it.
What if I did it for him? What if I helped you make arrests?
Alright, that was from the trailer of The Rock's latest effort, Snitch. Jerry, just real quick, like you always do, just go ahead and sit up Snitch for us, spoiler free, if you will.
Okay. Snitch is the story of a young guy named Jason Matthews who is the son of John Matthews, who is the character The Rock plays. And Jason Matthews is talking with a friend on Skype or something like that. And the friend ends up sending Jason a bag of ecstasy in the mail that he wants him to hold for him for, one day until he comes to get it. When Jason opens the bag, he finds a tracking device from the DEA, and DEA agents suddenly show up and, execute a search warrant on his house and arrest him for, basically they're saying he has an intent to deal because he has that much. Turns out that his friend had been caught trying to mail these drugs and was going to be sentenced under federal
mandatory minimum
sentencing of 10 years unless he gave somebody up. And of course his friend gave Jason up.
He snitched.
Yeah, he snitched. So now Jason is supposed to be going to jail for 10 years. And he doesn't know any drug dealers. The only person he knew was his friend who
smoked a little weed or something.
Yeah, it wasn't anything major. The Rock plays, obviously, the father. He has a successful construction business.
He's on his second marriage, John.
He's on his... I don't even know if it's his second marriage, as his son is from a high school sweetheart college girlfriend.
It could have been a first marriage, absolutely.
Yeah, or even just...
The Rock said they were sophomores in college when he was born.
But anyways, he's on another marriage. He has a daughter in that marriage. But obviously he's trying to keep his son out of jail for 10 years. And so he starts advocating for his son, using all of his contacts. He runs a successful construction supply business. And he gets in touch with Susan Sarandon, who plays a
federal
prosecutor. And she tells him, these laws are there really to basically make sure that people snitch on each other to reduce their sentences so they can catch drug dealers. And she says if Jason doesn't snitch on anybody, then he's going to be going to jail for 10 years, which they stress is more time than, most child molesters or rapists or bank robbers actually spend in jail.
That's stressed toward the end of the film.
Yeah. So The Rock decides that he's going to be doing the investigating. He's going to find some drug dealers, and he willingly volunteers to start, he starts doing it on his own initially, kind of vigilante style, but eventually becomes working with the DEA as undercover, finding out about these drug dealers, and he uses a employee who is played by John Bernthal, Shane Walsh in The Walking Dead, who has some connections from some past mistakes he's made, and uses John Bernthal's character to get involved in this world of drug dealing so he can find some people to bring down to release his son from jail.
And then snitch ensues.
A lot of snitching going on.
I gotta say, I really love this film. When the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I came into this film expecting, kind of a action movie with The Rock.
It really seemed the way it was marketed was as an action movie.
And when I walked out, I came out saying, this could be The Rock's best movie. It ended up surprisingly being a thought-provoking emotional drama, which director Rick Roman Waugh used the action and The Rock's presence and reputation as an actor kind of as a very subtle backdrop rather than having it be the driving force of the film, Jerry.
Yeah, I agree. I really, like I said, I thought we were going to go in and watch an action movie, and it turns out this did have a little bit more depth to it. It was very emotional. It was a drama. It was really the story of two fathers who were trying to do what was best for their kid. The Rock, has an 18-year-old son who's made some stupid mistakes, but certainly nothing that seems like he deserves to spend, 10 years in jail with hardened criminals. So he decides to put himself on the line. Not just his reputation and his business, but put his life on the line and get involved in this. John Bernthal, on the other hand, plays a father who's made some mistakes in the past. He has 2 felony charges on his record for, I think, selling narcotics or something. And he's trying to straighten his life out. He's trying to stay clean. He's trying to stay out of jail and, not have to leave his wife and his son, and to make sure this son doesn't go down the road that he went down. But he's sort of lured by The Rock's character to help make a contact, and he has to decide, how he's going to provide for his family, while he still knows some people who are involved in really shady stuff.
And Jerry, with that thought, talking about that contact, let's go ahead and so we can just go ahead and set it up. Snitch isn't a really, the plot is set up very simplistically, but there's very well from the get-go. Not a lot of spoiler-driven stuff.
It's based on a true story. I was trying to do a little bit of research. I didn't find a lot, but it sounds like, I don't think this is a one-for-one movie or anything where it's going to be like historical accuracy, but I think it's based on legitimately that somebody did do this.
But just to be safe, we've given you our initial reactions to Snitch. Let's go ahead and roll the reel forward to spoilers. All right, Jerry, you mentioned John Bernthal's character is making these contacts with former drug dealers. Let's talk about some of them. One of them was Malik, right?
Yeah.
That the situations to see The Rock be introduced into this world, kind of this very successful businessman, they were very tense.
It was very tense. Here they're going down this street that just, looks like it is out of the way. Stuff's overgrown. Houses are kind of dilapidated. Guys are just kind of hanging out in the front yard, keeping an eye out.
They're armed, too.
And they're armed, yeah. It really shows that this is a very different world. That there is a very different world of not just these, young kids who are sending pills back and forth, but this is a world where people are armed. This is a world of business. This is an arm where guys will readily kill just to make sure that their profits stay the same or go up a couple dollars.
And The Rock did a good job. The Rock's an imposing, huge guy.
Yeah.
And he did a good job kind of playing that fish out of water, kind of intimidated character.
Yeah.
Even though you look at The Rock and you say he shouldn't be intimidated by anything, but you could see he was. He was like, you could just see on his face just the worry about being in this neighborhood, and it really made you think as you were watching it, would I do this for my son?
And let's even
start family member.
Let's even start from earlier. Here's The Rock as, an intimidating, imposing guy who's got all this stuff organized, and as soon as his son gets, charged for this drug crime, he's powerless. He's not getting information about where his son's held. His son gets beat up while being held in, the county lockup.
And they have some very emotional scenes when they're meeting.
Sure.
And The Rock is on one side and his son's on the other.
When they're in the prison and they're using the phone to talk to each other behind the glass.
And The Rock is just helpless. And these are some of the most powerful scenes in the movie.
Here is somebody who has just been made powerless by these decisions, by these law enforcement decisions that have happened.
Fair or not?
Yeah, fair or not. He's powerless against what can go on there, and it's interesting to see him taken out of the element of usually being the tough guy who's in control, who's breaking necks and cashing checks.
And The Rock laying the smackdown.
Yeah,
that's The Rock's thing. If you're a WWE fan, if you're as we go through this, he goes through Malik, and we think, we're going to take Malik down, and then he's going to get his son's sentence reduced, and then the DEA agent in charge decides to call off that deal because Malik's going to lead him to his supplier, which we find out is the character El Topo, is what they refer to him.
El Topo?
El Topo, I believe. And we see that, and it's like with every time The Rock gets close to getting his son back and getting out of this predicament, it just gets pulled farther and farther away from
it's
him.
constantly that they realize they, Susan Sarandon plays the federal prosecutor
who is currently running a congressional campaign.
Yes.
In the film.
In the film, not in real life. They're using him. I mean, they're holding his son like a carrot, out there and getting him to constantly do what they want. Every time something, new pops up or they decide they can get a bigger fish, well, send him out to do it again.
And it eventually leads to his supplier, and then eventually he ends up running the drug cartel's money.
Yeah. I think they say $83 million or something. It's huge.
Into Mexico because, they can't do it. They can't transfer their money electronically because, the feds would just trace it. So, and it would be a money trail back to the cartel. So they physically transport their money a couple of times a year. And it's pretty much, The Rock knows this. If he does this, his son, Susan Sarandon, will let his son go immediately, she says. But Rock is informed by one of the DEA agents that he won't be coming back.
Yeah.
And, he's still willing to go through with it for the safety and release of his son. And he actually he pulls a little bit of a switch on the DEA, doesn't he, Jerry?
He does. He doesn't do anything super crazy, but he makes some plans of his own so that he can figure out where, this El Topo is going to be, this head of a drug cartel. So that they can catch him in the U.S., so that they reveal themselves and they can get the money, and he never has to go into Mexico.
And it was a very well thought out, but still risky plan by The Rock, and John Bernthal helps him get through that. And that's when we get to kind of actually really the only action set piece of the film.
Yeah, there weren't too many action pieces. I mean, this is the one that, watching the truck chase at the end of the movie,
which was all through the trailers.
Yeah. I think they just kept showing the same scene probably over and over. From
You're like,
this
is going to be an action-packed movie.
Oh yeah, lots of the rock, shooting people and driving trucks and stuff. Doesn't happen.
But
good movie just doesn't happen like an action movie.
But the action is it's very subtle and gritty. I like the way Rick Roman Waugh decided to shoot this. It was very, not too up close, but up close. You could get in there. There were a lot of up close scenes on The Rock driving this truck.
Yeah, you're not having a hard time seeing what's going on. It's not that close.
No, not that close, but it does the scene justice. And, it's not over the top action. It's realistic action that fits this film really well.
Yeah, you're never seeing something where you're like, okay, that couldn't happen.
It didn't reach like Live Free or Die Hard, crashing a plane,
absolutely
cop car to a helicopter.
Yeah, no.
But the action still, it worked very well. And if you were going into it expecting the action, you may be a little disappointed, but the payoff as far as action goes and the entire film was done pretty well. I mean, like we said, the whole time you're feeling The Rock's, the emotional stakes that are involved in this mission to get his son and what a man's willing to do. I really love John Bernthal. I think he was the perfect person to play this part. He's a recognizable face, but he's not going to overshadow The Rock. And he kind of has that, not slimy, more gritty. He's played those type of characters like Shane in The Walking Dead. So it was believable to see him in this kind of role as an ex-con in this film. And you like John Bernthal in this movie, didn't you?
Yeah, I love John Bernthal in this movie. I know in The Walking Dead, I mean, I hated when he was, not in the show anymore. I was really just thought that would make the show suffer. Show still seems to be doing really well, but I really miss the presence of Shane.
It was time for Shane to go.
He's a very intense actor. I mean, this movie did not give him the ability to do as much as Shane, explore as many things as Shane did. Of course, that's a TV series over, multiple episodes. But, I mean, he really struggled with, trying to do right by his younger son and not get back in this world while also struggling to provide for his son.
It fit John Bernthal very well, like we said. I say overall, I was really taken aback about how smart this film ended up being, Jerry.
It could have been a very formulaic, very generic, very forgettable movie.
Like Live Free or Die Hard.
But
excuse me, not Live Free or Die Hard.
Good Day to Die Hard.
Which we reviewed last week.
But they
went a different route.
They took an interesting story that was based on a 1999
real life event.
Yeah, real life event of some kind or news story. They got The Rock and John Bernthal to play very good characters. I mean, to really do
that you cared about.
Yeah, that you did care about, and they tied in that sort of way that people have a hot button issue of federal mandatory minimum sentences, and sort of tied all that together and made a movie that was far better than I was expecting it to be.
And that pretty much ended up being the central message of the movie, Jerry. While it was about what a guy was willing to do for his son, I think the overarching theme of the film was, to provide this commentary to make people think about federal mandatory minimum sentencing laws. Like we said when we were introducing the film, where something as rape is not is less of a minimum sentence, a mandatory minimum sentence than drugs. So which is obviously this is a political show, but I think most of our listeners would agree that's not right, and it shows how the system can really work against good people sometimes who just make a mistake.
And I definitely agree. It was It provoked more thought than you would think it would.
And overall, Jerry, what would you rate this film?
I was saying a 4 out of 5. I mean, it was a good movie. It's not the kind of movie that I'm going to watch over and over again. I mean, it's probably the kind of movie that if I ever see it, on Netflix or something, or something like that, or somebody
maybe watch it with your wife.
Yeah, my wife. If she wants to watch it when it comes out, we'll probably watch it. It's not the kind of movie I'm going to watch over and over again, but it was really good, and in some way, it has left an impression on me to think about, what's the real benefit, what's the real detriment of having these sort of inflexible sentences, or what's the real issue of having sentences that we put in place just to be, just so we can get people to snitch on other people. I mean...
And it made me think about the same things. I was going to go with 3.5, but after going home and considering this is probably The Rock's best film, and he's been in some good movies, not great movies, but like The Rundown and Walking Tall and stuff like that. He's been, this is his best role to date, and it was a movie that really made me think about mandatory minimum sentencing laws and how they, does the risk outweigh the reward. The risk of, sentencing somebody who doesn't deserve it, does that outweigh, taking down, drug kingpins? From the outside looking in, of course it does. You take down the suppliers and things of that nature. But, when it's your family member or your loved one or your friend, this movie makes you take that into consideration. Would you look at the situation differently? And I think when you're put in a situation, we all would, because we have that emotional attachment to the person who was hurt by these laws. But like I said, I was going to go with 3.5, but after thinking about all that, I decided, I confirmed it at a 4 out of 5. So Jerry and I were in agreement on Snitch. So.
Another Brad, we went with another Brad to see the movie, and he said he would have given it a 5.
Really? 5? Well,
he said he was easy to please.
He would have confirmed it epic. It wasn't quite there, but it was close, and this is the start of what looks like a huge year for The Rock. He's the WWE champion. He'll be headlining WrestleMania, fighting John Cena. And
G.I. Joe Retaliation.
G.I. Joe Retaliation. He's going to be in Michael Bay's Pain and Gain. He's going to be in Fast and the Furious 6. So this is a huge year.
He's got a huge year. Let's hope he pops up in the Expendables 3 when that eventually comes
awesome.
to fruition. He'd be a good addition to that cast.
He would. And speaking of The Rock, our wrestling consultant, Evan Truelove, will have plenty of coverage of WrestleMania when The Rock headlines that against John Cena. So just want to give a shout out to that coverage Evan has been doing with his The Best There Never Was article. I think that's just going to about wrap us up for Snitch, Jerry. Anything else you want to say about it?
Nothing else to add that I'm aware of.
Alright, so we're in agreement. 4 out of 5 for Snitch. I think that's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. Jerry Reed, where can we find more of your stuff this week?
Well, obviously I try to put stuff on epicreview.com as I can, but you can also always check there for my links to my Amazon page, where I try to put out new reviews of Lego and other action figures.
And as for me, you can find all of my stuff on Twitter at The Real Brad Bell. That's REEL, The Real Brad Bell. And, of course, all of my work's going to be on thepicreview.com, the Epic Review, as well as our official Facebook page where we post breaking epic news daily. Just search Facebook for TH Epic Review. And we thank everyone who tuned in for this giant-sized edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. And until next time, we are out.